is Ocean Robbins, and I am so excited that in less than 8 minutes we are going to begin day 5 of the Food Revolution Summit. We'll start today by sharing an interview with Dr. David Katz at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. GMT. An hour after that, we'll have an interview with Jonathan Safran-Foer, and at the top of the hour after that, we'll be sharing yet another fabulous broadcast, and all of these interviews will be personally conducted by my dad and colleague, John Robbins. Thank you so much for being here right now. The subject for today's interviews is our planet, how your food choices can change the world. We've received such wonderful responses to this summit so far, with thousands of comments submitted and hundreds of thousands of participants joining in. And as we move through this day, I want to invite you to post and engage in the comments stream on the broadcast page. You can share what you're learning, what you hear that is inspiring to you, what you're getting out of this summit, what you think of different speakers, and you can like and respond to and engage with the comments of others as well. Remember to refresh the comments using the Get the Latest Comments button so you can see the most recent ones that have been submitted. Cheryl Stokes said, "This is my 3rd summit. I've been following the whole food plant-based diet for the last 3 years, and I am no longer diabetic. I've lost 50 pounds effortlessly, and I no longer wear glasses, which I'd been wearing for 50 years. I'm grateful for the replays. Since I work from 9 to 9, I can play the summit at a faster speed and listen to it for an hour after work and the second hour in the morning before 8. Well, Cheryl, we're so glad you are here with us, and I am so heartened and delighted to hear about the results that you have experienced in these last 3 years. Congratulations, and thank you for sharing your story." Sunny V said, "The Food Revolution and Susan Pierce Thompson blessed me and changed my life forever. This is my 2nd time following you and your father. Me and my mother, both nurses, lost a lot of weight and changed our diet to a whole food diet, hopefully for the rest of our life, following the Brightline Eating meal plan. This and the Food Revolution is a blessing which I am forever thankful for. The gift of health, knowledge, happiness, and quality of life. Your work and revolution is truly a blessing which our world needs so much. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm working as a nurse, and I may see the results of poor diet and lifestyle, as I think I may often be a result on a daily basis." It may often be a result on a daily basis, working with stroke, heart, diabetes, and sometimes cancer patients. I can tell you that your message fills me with so much hope for the future, listening to your stunning news. The wrap-up is stunning too. Lots of blessings to you. Sandra from Norway. Well, thank you so much, Sandra. Thanks for mentioning the daily wraps as well. If anybody has not been participating, every day you get a daily wrap. About an hour after we wrap the summit, we're posting it up, and it's my dad and colleague, John Robbins, and I joining with cardiologist Dr. Joel Kahn to debrief the day. What happened? What did we learn? What did we think of it? What inspired us? So go ahead and tune in each afternoon or evening, depending on what time zone you're in, for the daily wrap for each day of this summit. If you just joined us, we'll be starting today's broadcast in about 4 minutes. As we go through the day, I invite you to regularly refresh the comments right on the broadcast page, posting your thoughts, your reactions, your feelings, and also especially sharing any insights that you hear and want to capture or share with others. The subject for today's interviews is Planet, how your food choices can change the world. We'll be beginning with Dr. David Katz in a few moments. Dean Cooling said, "There's a load of work for you, Ocean, reading 23,000 plus comments. But I just wanted to say how impressed I am with how good a host you have become. So articulate and considerate. Thank you. Your father has long been a hero of mine. Now you're fast becoming one too. Such great content so far. I wish you and the team much strength and inspiration in spreading this wonderful news. Bless you all from down under." Well, Dean, thank you so much. That's so sweet of you. I appreciate your appreciation. And really, it is an incredible privilege and joy to read the comments that people are sharing, because we spend almost a year preparing for every single Food Revolution Summit with our whole team. And to now feel the impact of it reaching so many lives. And I mean, this is why we do it, right? This is why we're here. And so thank you for your appreciation and for being a part of it with us. Alyssa Beck said, "Thank you for sharing your amazing wisdom through these interviews. Joy and anger. I understand this statement. I've spent my optometric career facilitating natural vision improvement with those I work with. When patients first begin the journey towards improving their vision, they ask why they had not heard of this paradigm before. Just as the doctor responded to the patient, saying he or she or they did not know about the possibility of reversing chronic illness with the whole food plant-based model, the conventional model of vision care does not yet include the reversal of diabetic retinopathy using whole food plant-based lifestyle. It's time for all doctors and health and wellness practitioners to include the truth of this work to all the truth tellers here. Many chronic vision issues are reversible. I'm doing my best to share this information widely and hope to work with you, Ocean and John, and others to help spread the message to the field of vision care. Extra blessings to all." Alyssa, thank you so much for sharing that and for your wonderful work. It's true. I know I have a dear friend who suffered from diabetic retinopathy, and she reversed it with a whole foods plant-based diet. She literally got her vision back. What a big transformative moment in somebody's life. Thank you for helping so many people recover their sight. If you just joined us, we'll be starting today's broadcast in just a couple of minutes. Today's topic is planet, how your food choices can change the world. We're going to start off with world-renowned public health advocate, Dr. David Katz. The truth is, your food choices impact your health in profound ways. They also impact our planet. They impact people, policies, and communities around the world. And they help to shape the future that we will pass on to coming generations. If you want to bring your food choices into alignment with your values, if you care where your food comes from, how it was produced, what kind of a world it promotes, if you want to feel informed and empowered to make a difference on this planet, to be standing and eating on the right side of history and to be part of the solution, then you are going to love these presentations. We'll be beginning with Dr. David Katz with a prescription for a healthier planet in about a minute. At the top of the hour after that, you'll hear from Jonathan Safran Foer on how saving the world begins at breakfast. And at the top of the hour after that, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 Pacific, you'll hear from Dr. Vandana Shiva on our food and our future. As always, each interview will be expertly guided by my dad and colleague, John Robbins. Will last about 45 minutes and will be followed by questions, answers, reflections, and take-it-home insights guided by me. I am so excited for today's speakers. And now we are ready to begin. Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. This is Ocean Robbins, and I am joined by my dad and colleague, John Robbins, in welcoming our guest, Dr. David Katz. Dr. David Katz is a preventive medicine specialist and globally recognized authority on lifestyle medicine. He's the founding director of the Yale Griffin Prevention Research Center, past president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and founding president of True Health Initiative, a coalition of more than 500 world-renowned physicians, scientists, and nutrition experts from 45 countries committed to establishing and communicating the scientific consensus on the optimal diet for human beings and the planet. My dad and I are both proud to be members of True Health Initiative. Dr. Katz is the recipient of 3 honorary doctorates and the author of 17 books, including his latest, How to Eat, All Your Food and Diet Questions Answered, which he wrote with Mark Bittman. So now, David, my dad and I are so grateful to you for all you're up to, and we are so glad to have this time with you. And now for this interview, I'm going to hand it over to my dad and colleague, John Robbins.
Well, thank you, Ocean, for that introduction. And thank you, David, for being with us today.
Great to be with you both. Thank you, John. And thanks for the kind words, Ocean.
David, at the bottom of your recent emails, you have placed a statement that you wrote, which reads, As I learn ever more from environmental experts, I find that our debates about diet for human health are apt to become moot very soon. The impact of our prevailing diets on the planet is fast becoming the only thing that really matters. There will be no point in debating diet for human health on a planet no longer hospitable to human habitation, and we are blithely and blindly blundering in that very direction. David, can you help us understand why you wrote this statement and why it's now attached, I believe, to every email that you sent?
John, I don't pretend to be expert in things I'm not. And in some ways, I regret that I didn't go into environmental science and sustainability. Maybe I should have been an engineer and focused on carbon sequestration. But 30 some odd years ago, I didn't know that. And, I really thought the tidal wave of chronic disease was the signature issue of our time. So my whole career has been devoted to that as a preventive medicine physician. And then over the last decade and a half, we've all witnessed the climate emergency, the rapid acceleration of extinction, biodiversity loss, the drying of aquifers, the rising of seas become the signature issue of our time. It really is the thing that most imperils the health, not just of some number of us, but quite frankly, of our species. So I routinely make the case now when I'm at the podium that I don't think you can call yourself a health professional in 2020 if you don't advocate frequently and fiercely for the health of the planet. And the basic point I'm making in that statement in my emails is informed by my 25-year experience as a clinician, patients in the ICU. Once you get to the ICU, all of your good options are gone. You're in desperate peril. You wind up having tubes stuck into you, drastic measures taken. Everything you do for a patient in the ICU comes at a cost. Routinely, we're supporting one organ in a way that injures another. And the planet's headed in that direction. And I think it's a critical thing for people to understand that, once we go too far in the direction of this crisis, we've lost all of the good options. And so I'm accustomed in my world to being able to debate diet with regard to preference and health. And there is some latitude there, and we can get into that. I think there are many variations on the theme of optimal eating for people. But with the planet on the threshold of the intensive care unit, we're going to narrow down our options very severely because it suddenly becomes a matter of what is sustainable for a population of 8 billion or more hungry people? What can we produce without further drying out our aquifers? What can we produce without adding more carbon to the atmosphere? And that boxes us in. So that's just become an extremely salient consideration. I don't think we should be having any more debates about diet for human health that don't include a focus on diet for the sake of a healthy planet. Because again, there are no healthy people on a ruined planet.
Well, big beef and big dairy have been fighting bitterly and aggressively to make sure that burgers and cheese maintain a prominent place on the American plate, and they've particularly sought to ensure that these foods retain their foothold in the U.S. dietary guidelines. And one result is that in the forthcoming 2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, health researchers have been strictly forbidden from factoring in the environmental impact of food. This separation of human health on the one hand from planetary sustainability on the other is being largely imposed by the U.S. government at the behest of the U.S. meat and dairy industries. David, how important are the dietary guidelines, and what are the consequences to all of us of sustainability concerns of planetary health being excluded from them?
I have several feelings about that, John, and I'll circle back to how important the guidelines are. But just between us, I know a number of people on the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. So that's the group that essentially gets their arms around the science to provide the recommendations to the government, to USDA, about what the official guidelines ought to be. I've always considered the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee report much more important than the official dietary guidelines because it's the undiluted, unpoliticized science. And it's always been somewhat different from what actually sees daylight in the official dietary guidelines. But of course, the good news is the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee report sees daylight of its own. It gets published online. And I have historically referred people to that. And I've said that's more important than the guidelines. The guidelines are what politicians and policymakers want you to know about what the science says. The committee report is what the science says. So go straight to the source. This time we have a bigger problem because it's not just that the guidelines can't address sustainability, but the scientists on the Guidelines Advisory Committee were told that any questions about the place of meat in the American diet were out of bounds. They weren't allowed to even look at the science. I have a number of friends and colleagues on the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. My view is that the scientists should have all quit in protest, and there should have been no new dietary guidelines because the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee should have refused to do this work with their wings clipped at the start. That hasn't happened. And so back to your question, how important are the dietary guidelines? I've always felt, as I noted, that the politicized version should be less important than the science on which they're based. But of course, they have the full imprimatur of the U.S. government behind them. So they influence food policy in the United States. They influence school nutrition. They influence WIC. They're pushed out to dietitians. They're pushed out to diabetes educators. So there's no question that they are of importance. I think the typical member of society has some doubts about the government's ability to issue reliable dietary guidance, has some concerns about these entanglements with big business interests, has heard from the likes of you, John, about the influence of big beef and big dairy. And so I don't think the dietary guidelines are massively influential on what the typical American believes or eats. But because it reverberates through national nutrition policy, it's still important. And I think it is tragic and an abdication of one of the great responsibilities of our time to think that we can continue talking about diet for the health of a population of 350 million people and not consider whether or not there will still be food for our children and our children's children. And let's be frank, when we talk about sustainability, that is what we mean. It's asking the question, are we going to eat up our children's food? Are we going to drink up our children's water? Because an unsustainable food supply means we get ours and they don't get theirs.
That's true. And I've always been inspired by the idea that wisdom comes from thinking about the consequences of our actions and decisions on 7 generations down the line, 7 generations forward.
Right.
But we're now seemingly not thinking about that at all. And I find this to be a very troubling and worrisome and actually alarming development. On the other hand, there are some people working, such as you are, to bring the truth forward. Last October, perhaps the most sophisticated analysis ever done on the health and environmental impacts of foods that are common in Western diets was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And the conclusion was that fruits and vegetables and beans and whole grains are best for both avoiding disease and for protecting the climate and our water resources. And on the other hand, the conclusion was that red and processed meat causes the most ill health and the most pollution. Dr. Michael Clark from the University of Oxford, who led the research, said, "Continuing to eat the way we do threatens societies through chronic ill health and degradation of Earth's climate, ecosystems, and water resources. Choosing better, more sustainable diets is one of the main ways people can improve their health and help protect the environment." That's what he said. David, if we were going to create guidelines that really were based in the complete science toward a truly healthy and sustainable diet, what would they be? And if those guidelines were to be adopted, what would change?
Yeah, I'm almost tempted to say amen to what you just read, John. It's absolutely correct. And it's incredibly consistent. There is this enormous volume of directionally confluent scientific literature, epidemiologic studies, intervention trials, randomized trials, mechanistic studies. It just goes on, and all points in that same direction. Real food, plant predominant. And all the best health outcomes are produced when people eat mostly minimally processed vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds, and mostly drink plain water when thirsty, and everything else should be at the margins of an optimal diet. And it turns out that all the same things that are best for human health, and again, that's what I've devoted my career as a physician to, are best for the planet. That's good luck. So there is a really bright light here, and that is the diet that's best for us is the diet that's best for biodiversity and best for aquifers and best for the oceans and best for the climate. And that really is a stroke of good luck. It didn't need to be that way. We are in the privileged position of being able to love food that loves our health back and loves the planet back. I agree that the study you cite is extremely important, but absolutely massive volumes of consistent information pointing in this direction, with, of course, the occasional starkly contrarian note, usually with ties to the beef industry or the dairy industry or big agribusinesses. So when we hear the benefits of producing meat and what a great concentrated source of protein it is, the reality is we can get all the protein we need from plants. And another really important publication we should talk more about, the Eat Lancet report on people, planet, and diet. The conclusion there is that in modern countries around the world, if we're going to stay within sustainable boundaries, and they looked at all the relevant parameters from water utilization to land use to the climate and carbon emissions, we need to reduce prevailing levels of meat intake, beef in particular, by about 90%.
Well, when you talk about the importance of real food and a plant predominant diet style and the need to collectively reduce our meat consumption, particularly our beef consumption, by as much as 90%, I'm thinking back when human numbers were far fewer. We were mostly a foraging species. We ate large amounts of wild plants, and the animals we hunted were wild and active and sustained themselves by eating wild plants. Today, though, it would take 15 times the total land surface area of the entire planet to provide enough land for the current human population to survive by foraging. The only way we can possibly supply the amount of meat being eaten today is through factory farming and feedlots, through methods of production that adulterate the composition of the meat, impose horrible abuses on our fellow creatures, undermine public health, and are devastating the climate. So, David, it seems to me, for the sake of disease prevention, for the sake of disease reversal, for the sake of people and planet alike, for the sake of our future, we should all be eating a plant predominant diet. And if we're able to give up meat entirely, so much the better.
Exactly. Yep. Amen again, John. Yeah, seems to me just the same. And exactly as you say, in the Stone Age, we were isolated, roaming bands of foragers in a great big empty world of seemingly inexhaustible resources. And had we never invented agriculture and stayed there, we could have remained foragers. But by inventing agriculture, concentrating food production, we gave rise to civilization. Civilization gave rise to population density. Population density gave rise to more civilization, ultimately the advances that allowed us to massively curtail mortality rates, extend lifespan. And here we are, 8 billion strong and more of us all the time. And that is the math. And then if you're going to satisfy an appetite for meat and animal food for a population that large, then you wind up with concentrated farming methods. And no one has taught me more about the abuses of those, John, than you. It's totally eye-opening for me when I read your book, The Food Revolution. I had been, I guess, pleasantly unaware of how horrible it was. I grew up as a kid with a fairly typical American diet, and I didn't think all that much about what was putting that food on my plate. I gave up mammals quite early on because I loved my dogs, I loved horses, and I was just sort of struck by the fact that animals that were more alike than different were playing these starkly different roles in my life. Some were members of my family, and others were for dinner. I wasn't okay with that, but in terms of knowing just how bad it really is, you opened my eyes to that. I've been forever grateful. And absolutely, that's a critical consideration. Most people I know are good people. They're decent people. They may be unaware of certain things, but I don't think too many people I know would willingly put cruelty to other creatures on the menu, but it is. And so all of these things wind up coming together. If we just think about diet for human health, we wind up with an argument for a diet of real food, minimally processed, and plant predominant. But there's a trifecta to consider. There's what's best for human health, what's best for planetary health, and that pushes us certainly further in the direction of plant predominance, if not plant exclusivity. And then there's what's best for our fellow creatures. And obviously, it's best for them not to be subject to the abuses of factory farming. It's pretty much what you just said. Not everybody is going to get the memo. Not everybody is going to cut their meat intake by the 90% that we need to average. And so, to compensate for those who don't go nearly as far in that direction as they should, some of us should go all the way, and help move that average towards the plant predominant, sustainable, healthy for the planet, healthy for the people, no factory farming required, better for our fellow creatures version of dietary intake.
When you said that most people wouldn't willingly put cruelty on the menu, but it's there now today with factory farming.
Yeah, right. I think they're doing it because they haven't had their eyes open to what's going on, and they've had the opportunity, but have maybe chosen to look away. We clearly need to get everybody to see it. I like to think that if people are putting cruelty on the menu, it's inadvertent rather than intentional.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure in most cases. But it is also perpetuated by the disinformation campaigns of the meat and dairy industries. And I think similarly, most people wouldn't willingly put greenhouse gas emissions on their menu. They wouldn't want their diets to be contributing to global warming and climate change and the decimation of the planet and extinction of species and the compromising of the future of life on Earth. But it is on the menu right now. It is implicit in the diets that most people are eating. And it seems to me, David, that one of the obstacles that's preventing us from moving toward more health promoting, planet friendlier, climate preserving, plant powered diets is the idea that carbs are evil. David, why have so many people been led to believe that carbs are evil, and what is the truth?
And before taking that on, Jen, just to circle back to what you were just saying, all of these ramifications of our dietary practices and disinformation from big food, beef and dairy in particular, there's the general cost of that. So you sum that up in terms of climate and planet and oceans and biodiversity. But it's time to invite people to recognize the very specific ways the dots connect. So, we think of the Amazon rainforest as a jewel of the planet. I don't think any of us ever thought it would go away, but we are at risk of seeing it go away. And the reason the Amazon is being burned down is to satisfy the global appetite for beef, pure and simple. It's because beef is profitable and can be sold around the world. So let's cut down one of the crown jewels of the entire planet so we can graze beef cattle and sell that. It's absolutely terrible. And I don't know if people realize that the rainforests in Borneo, which are home to such magnificent creatures as the orangutan, which lives nowhere else, are being burned down for palm oil plantations to make processed food that we don't need. So it's not just generic costs to the environment. These very specific places that are absolutely iconic are in the mix here. And it's time for us all to rise up and oppose that. And part of the reason that we haven't expressed that communal outrage is we get talked into confusion about what's the right thing. The news about diet keeps changing. And salient in that mix is this notion that carbs are evil. So the simple response there, John, is we always seem to need a scapegoat. And so for a while, it was dietary fat. Absolutely, that got oversold. So we were cutting nuts and avocados out of our diet. That's never what the science showed, kind of ran amok. But the claim that carbohydrate is evil is even sillier because all plants are carbohydrate sources: vegetables, fruits, grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, all carbohydrate sources. So saying cut carbs, avoid carbs, basically is saying avoid all of the most highly nutritious and, by the way, sustainable and eco-friendly foods. It's pretty much flat out crazy.
Well, a very large percentage of the carbohydrate-containing foods that people are eating today in the standard American diet are highly refined carbs. There's enormous amounts of added sugars in the diet. The grains we as a culture are eating are, for the most part, refined, bleached, and adulterated. And if you go to Cinnabon, you're going to eat very high carbohydrate food, but it's not really going to feed your
John,
cells.
When's the last time you went to Cinnabon? Come on.
Well, I walked by one the other day. Okay. I didn't eat anything from it, but I must say
it smell pretty good.
Oh my God, the smell just it got me.
Right.
I didn't, not to the point that I would indulge, but
you make a really good point. You're right. In order to dispel the myth that all carbohydrate is evil, I neglected this point. You're absolutely right. Massive excesses of added sugar, which of course is a carbohydrate source in the typical American diet. Massive excess of highly refined grains, white flour, which of course is a source of refined or simple carbohydrate. So, if you look at bad foods and say a lot of these bad foods are mostly carbohydrate, let's call carbohydrate bad. Okay, in some sense, you've got a point, but you're really replicating the follies of history. It's exactly what we did with fat, exactly what we did. So we were eating way too much saturated fat from meat, processed processed dairy. And instead of being clear, hey, we should eat less meat, processed dairy, and eat more vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds, we said fat is bad, and we threw out the baby with the bathwater. So we're doing exactly the same thing again. Famous aphorism, those who don't learn from the follies of history are destined to repeat them. And man, is that us when it comes to food. And I think the reality check here, John, is there is more than one way to eat badly. And we Americans seem committed to exploring them all.
With dire consequences to our health and to the planet.
Exactly.
I'm going to go, David. You referred to climate change, and you said one of the scary parts of it is how fast it's happening. Not that long ago, scientists were saying that climate change was a slow process. And in fact, some were worried that we wouldn't do anything about it because it would take so long to become apparent. Even James Hansen, one of the first and foremost scientists to warn us about climate change, wrote a popular book titled Storms of My Grandchildren. That was the time scale we thought we were dealing with, but we were wrong. And for me, now, the speed at which it's occurring is one of the most terrifying aspects about climate change. And tragically, we have continued to make the problem worse. With every passing year, we've been setting new records for global carbon emissions. There are some countries whose emissions are going down a little bit, but not many, and they're not going down by much. And when you take in the full picture, it's very much not the case, as a lot of people think, that we're moving in the right direction, but not fast enough. I mean, to judge by emissions, we're moving in the wrong direction still. In fact, half of all the emissions that we've produced in the entire history of humanity have come in just the last 30 years. David, as a public health physician, you've been working for decades to help people to live healthier lives, to add years to their lives, and to add life to their years. You're now saying that the lifestyle practices we need to implement to promote health and to prevent and even reverse most diseases are entirely congruent with what we need to do for the health of the planet. That is a remarkable reality. Can you help our listeners to understand that more fully?
Well, John, what you just described, I feel it every day. And, I don't know if the audience wants me to be this candid, but for the first time in my life, I'm struggling not to be depressed. It's an existential crisis that is unprecedented. There's nothing remote or theoretical about climate change. And I have dear friends in California and I have dear friends in Australia. And I don't think ever before any time in my life have I ever had friends displaced from their homes by fire. And within the past year, I've had dear friends in two far separated parts of the world undergo the exact same thing. It's absolutely staggering how quickly this is overtaking us. It's very frightening. So we all want to be as much a part of the solution as we can. Diet is one of those areas where we can be a direct participant in the solution. We need clean energy sources. We need carbon sequestration. We need young people who are committed to being part of the solution. We're living our lives and this is happening around us and it's scaring us. Changing our diets in the direction of plant predominance, less processed food, drink water, not soda, all those fairly obvious things, and those are the two key axes, by the way. Move from highly processed to minimally processed or unprocessed food, whole food, and move from animal food to plant food. That can add up to an absolutely huge contribution to sparing our aquifers, sparing wildlife, avoiding incursions into fragile ecosystems, and helping to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the beautiful thing about it is it's actionable. And oh, by the way, there's a side effect. You'll be healthier into the bargain.
Yes, you will. You mentioned how much anxiety and even depression the situation can evoke in people who are aware of what's taking place. Climate change is on a lot of people's minds today, one way or the other. A lot of us are frightened by it, and another group of us don't want to even think about it. The American Psychological Association now is talking about something called eco-anxiety. Eco-anxiety isn't a formal diagnosis, but it's increasingly common today, and it's defined as, quote, the dread and helplessness that come with watching seemingly irrevocable acts of climate change unfold and worrying about the future for oneself, children, and later generations. That's the definition of eco-anxiety, and I suspect a lot of our listeners can relate to this. I certainly can.
I can too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I have it, John. But what I would say is let's not be helpless. Let's act. I think the remedy for feeling helpless is to do something. And there's a lot we can do. This is about the future for our children, grandchildren, and ultimately the power does reside with the mass of us. We just have to be sufficiently unified to represent a shared view about what needs to happen. And I certainly see a lot of movement in that direction. The fact that we're having this conversation and what that means is there are more and more bridges being built. This is a very strong emphasis at the Culinary Institute of America. That's new. Training chefs did not used to involve a focus on things like biodiversity and aquifers. It does now. That's promising.
I like your point that the remedy for eco-anxiety is to take meaningful action. We have surveys telling us that more than half of our kids sometimes or often feel helpless and anxious in the face of our deteriorating environment. But among those children whose families are taking some kind of action, their feelings of helplessness and their feelings of anxiety are far less frequent and far milder, and their feelings of hope and faith and confidence are much higher. And I think we have grounds for hope. Recently, Dr. Helen Harwat from Harvard University and a team of scientists that she led from a number of other leading U.S. universities calculated what would happen if every American made a single dietary change, which was to substitute beans for beef. And they found that if everyone did make that one change, the U.S. could come very close to meeting its greenhouse gas emissions goals, even if nothing about our energy infrastructure or transportation system were to change, and even if people kept eating chicken and pork and eggs and cheese. This one dietary change, substituting beans for beef, could achieve nearly 75%, they said, of the reductions needed to meet that target, even with the federal government doing really nothing to help. And the researchers also found that a beans for beef swap would mean much less deforestation and much less land degradation because far fewer plant crops would have to be grown to run through the digestive tracts of cattle. If Americans traded their beef for beans, the researchers concluded that would free up almost half of all the cropland in the country. So, David, from this data, it's clear that switching from beans to beef would be a hugely beneficial shift for the environment and for the climate. What I want to ask you is, as a physician who has extraordinary expertise in the relationship between food and health, how would such a switch affect human health?
Again, we're very fortunate. There's a perfect confluence between what's best for the planet and what's best for our own health. First, if you look at what are the dietary patterns associated with the best human health, your eyes are drawn to the blue zones described by our friend Dan Buettner. Those 5 places around the world where people most routinely live to be 100, don't get chronic disease. And the single dietary factor Dan calls out as most salient and most alike across these 5 very distinct populations is beans. Beans are prominent in blue zone diets, full stop. So, if what we care about is that combination of years in life, life in years, beans are a fixture. But we also have more granular science. There was a study out of Harvard in 2010 that looked at the population in the Nurses' Health Study, so 100,000 women followed for many years, and looked very specifically at food for food substitutions and the impact it had on rates of cardiovascular disease over time. And the single greatest precipitous drop in the risk of cardiovascular disease in these women was seen when beans replaced beef. So the very thing we would argue to do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to spare our fellow creatures, to preserve our aquifers, to make better use of our land, to increase total food production is absolutely mirrored by the results in studies of human health. And then more recently, a very large study, again out of Harvard this time, looked at well over 100,000 people followed for 30 years and basically found the greater the percentage of total calories from animal protein, meaning meat, processed meat, dairy, processed dairy, plus eggs, the higher the rate of premature death from all causes. Whereas the higher the percentage of calories from plant protein sources, so beans, legumes, to some extent nuts and seeds, certain grains, the lower the rate of premature death from all causes. More animal protein, more premature death, replace it with plant protein and of course beans, you minimize the risk of premature death from all causes. So we're looking across the expanse of all the stuff none of us wants to have happen to us: heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, dementia, and so on. So again, perfect alignment between what's kinder and gentler to our fellow creatures who have as much right to be here and live lives free of abuse and cruelty as we do. What's better for the environment, the climate, and what is optimal for our overall health and our coronary arteries.
I keep hearing from you that there's this confluence between what's good for us and what's good for the web of life, for the other creatures, and what's good for the planet itself. And to me, this is so powerful. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization is telling us that growing more beans, lentils, and other legumes is one of the most powerful steps we can take to improve the health of the world's soils. And this is critical because the state of the world's soils has become a serious problem and is threatening to worsen hunger and poverty levels. Planting legumes, planting beans, peas, lentils can really help because these crops transfer nitrogen from the atmosphere to the soil. They can be grown practically anywhere. And to me, this is really beautiful. We have nutritionists telling us that legumes are excellent sources of protein and fiber and many essential minerals and phytochemicals and are associated with living longer and healthier lives. We have soil scientists telling us that soils and legumes have a unique capacity to take nitrogen out of the air and draw it into the soil, which eliminates the needs for farmers to use fossil fuel-based nitrogen fertilizers. David, it seems to me that beans and lentils and other legumes are part of the answer, not only to the world's protein needs, which they are, but also to the fertility needs of the world's soils.
Totally agree, John. And a number of scientists who look at that reach the conclusion that you described. And I think there is another element, and that's the problems with large monocultures. And generally, when we devote vast acreage to growing just one kind of plant, it's often to feed animals so we can eat the animals. So essentially, you use legumes because they're a great food source, but they're also enriching the soil so you can diversify food production in that tract of land by doing crop rotation, growing more than one kind of plant. And that starts to speak to the value of more local food production, less centralized, avoiding monoculture. That's really important too. And the other thing is, if you are treating the soil with respect, it's a carbon sink. This is not a conversation about futility or hopelessness or helplessness. There's this cluster of changes we could make in the way we produce and consume food. So there's so many opportunities for insights, advances, and enlightened methods to help us overcome these challenges we face. There is abundant reason for hope in this discussion.
There is. And I hear you talking here about regenerative agriculture, which is capable of drawing down the excess carbon that we've already put into the atmosphere and putting it back into the soil, which is really where it was before. We undertook this vast experiment of toxic, chemical intensive, monoculture based industrial agriculture that destabilizes the climate, that degrades soil and water and biodiversity and human health and local economies, and is just really a dark force. But regenerative agriculture can rejuvenate the soil, it can rejuvenate grasslands and forests, it can replenish the water tables, it can promote food sovereignty, which is a social justice issue, it can restore public health and prosperity, all while cooling the planet by drawing down billions of tons of excess carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in the soil where it belongs. People don't realize that a third of the carbon that's in the atmosphere today used to be in the soil. And the farming methods that are at the core of industrial farming have been responsible for moving staggering amounts of carbon from the soil into the atmosphere. And I think we really should call industrial agriculture degenerative agriculture because it's responsible for so much degeneration of the biosphere.
I think that's a great term. I hope it catches on, John. I'll start using that. If you were to rely on these methods of agriculture that treated the soil with respect and ensured that it was sustainable and cut back on herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, that focused on sequestering carbon rather than releasing it, all of those models lead in the direction of much more plant predominant diets, much less animal food in the diet. So I think implicit in that is the idea that you are using soil as a carbon sink and you're recycling nutrients into the soil so you can grow a wide variety of crops. And I totally agree with you. And I think you do a great job of making the distinction perfectly clear by referring to agriculture at scale and industrial practice as usual as degenerative. And I think we can all root for an approach that is regenerative and enriches our health, preserves the planet, enriches the soil.
If someone asks you how much meat they should eat, what do you say to them?
If they're willing to eat none, I'd say none. It's not because I think the optimal diet for human health must exclude meat. I don't know. The kind of meat our Stone Age ancestors ate was the meat of wild animals. So, would it be good for you if you mostly ate plants but occasionally ate antelope? It might be. I don't presume to say for sure. What I know is that we can absolutely thrive on a diet that's plant exclusive. There are 8 billion of us. There aren't enough antelope to go around. There isn't enough space on the planet for us to eat that way. And so we all need to eat a whole lot less meat than currently prevails. And since some people are not going to cooperate, everybody who's willing to eat no meat at all should eat no meat at all. I think that's the right response. If you refuse to give up meat entirely because you like it too much, I'd say, well, consider these new meat alternatives because maybe you'd be willing to change your mind. And if you still say, no, I'm not giving it up completely, I'd say, well, think of it as a treat. And however often you eat it now, eat it less. If you eat it 3 times a day, eat it once a day. If you eat it once a day, try to eat it once a week. If you eat it once a week, try to eat once every 2. We need to recognize that not everybody is in the same stage of change. Not everybody is willing to move in the same direction at the same pace. So those who are willing to give up meat do. Again, for human health, it's at least as good, if not better, than every other option. For the health of the planet, it's better than every other option. And for the kinder, gentler treatment of our fellow creatures, it's better than every other option. That's a really strong congruency of reasons to give up meat if you're willing to. And if you're not willing to, cut back as much as you are willing to.
Well, I like your answer to that hypothetical question that I posed. And I'm seeing the Impossible Burger and the Beyond Burger making enormous inroads now and swiftly into the mainstream eating patterns of the country. I don't know how much healthier they are, if any, than beef burgers, but I do know no animals are confined in factory farms or no animals are slaughtered for their production. And I know they have a tremendous environmental benefits compared to beef. The Beyond Meat Burger uses 99% less water, 93% less land, and produces 90% less fossil fuel emissions compared to beef. The Impossible Burger uses 87% less water, 96% less land, and produces 89% less fossil fuel emissions than beef. And those are huge benefits. So even though I'm not convinced fully that these products are healthier than the meat products they're replacing, I am convinced that the pressure on the planet would be impacted in a huge and positive way if everyone replaced meat with these kinds of plant-based alternatives. Personally, I'm going to stick to eating beans instead of beef, but I rejoice that these plant-based burgers are in fact being eaten now by many people who otherwise would be eating meat. David, do you see it that way too?
Exactly that way, John. So, I don't want a veggie burger that bleeds. I love plant foods. I really do. I love them. And I don't want them to taste too much like meat, which is something I cut out of my diet as a teenager and never looked back and don't miss. And, so I am not in that market. I think the real value here is for people who are very reluctant to give up meat because they're used to eating it and they like it. I know it'd be better for the planet, but I really like meat. Well, that's the market for these meat alternatives. So these are people who would otherwise be eating meat. And absolutely better for fellow creatures, better for the planet. And if you simply are unwilling to cut beef and burgers out of your diet unless you can find something else that tastes a lot like them, then at a minimum, these products are very unlikely to be any worse for your health than what you're eating now. They're probably better, but certainly no worse. And they absolutely are much better for every aspect of the environment, much better for our fellow creatures. So by all means, go for it.
I'm seeing positive signs elsewhere too. Last January, the 77th Golden Globes Awards ceremony, known for being the party of the year, served 100% plant-based meals for the first time ever and did so to draw attention to climate change. Time Magazine's Person of the Year for last year was Greta Thunberg, who's become world famous as a teenager for her courageous and passionate activism around climate change. Part of Greta's response to the climate crisis, which she obviously takes profoundly seriously, has been to become a dedicated vegan and to demand that her parents do so also. Now, her parents were extremely reluctant to make the shift, but their daughter was adamant and persuasive, and eventually they succumbed. Now, David, Greta Thunberg is a force of nature, and one of the things that she has had the clarity and the courage to make clear is that our leaders are not looking after us. We are not being cared for at the very level of our survival. And for many of us, and most definitely including me, this has been painful to realize. No matter how many times I've been disappointed by the failings of our politicians, this realization still comes as a blow. And to my eyes, This fact that our leaders are asleep at the switch, makes it all the more important that each of us do what we can and do what needs to be done, and that as a society, we do eat less meat. David, do you see it that way too?
I do, John, and I think we all need to be politically active. At minimum, everybody needs to vote. And I think what you just said was a passionate plea for everybody to vote as if the world depends on it, because it does. And while we can do an awful lot with our own forks to be a force for change, and we can channel our inner Greta, and we can adopt the change we want to see in the world. We can persuade others. I had a similar effect on my family. I'm not the force of nature that Greta is, but same thing. I persuaded my family to change the way they ate. We can all do a lot as individuals, but we can do much more as we come together and exercise the force of the body politic. We all need to be in on that. So we all need to vote. And I would argue, look, whatever your party, whatever's in your wallet or bank account, we all need the planet. There is no planet B, and it's absolutely true. And so, you think about the children. You talked about 7 generations, Sean. Geez, I'd settle these days for just a couple. 7 would be better, but we really need to make sure there is a habitable world for children and grandchildren. It's that perilous. How can not that rise above any other parochial interest we might have? Because nothing you've ever cared about matters if we don't have a planet to call home. It's that simple. So I completely agree that we should exercise the change that resides with each of us. But I think we also need to acknowledge, and I think Greta certainly does, that the greatest capacity for change comes by changing one another's minds. The food supply will change if the food demand requires it. And politics will change if enough voters and citizens require it. And our leaders will be shown the door and replaced by people who recognize the urgency of addressing the stabilization of the climate and the preservation of this beautiful planet if enough voters demand and require it. That power resides with us. And so, we all have to reach out, find one another, come together, and exercise that collective force in conjunction with the things we can do as individuals.
When I think about what's keeping us from doing that, what's keeping us from channeling our inner Greta, as you referred to a moment ago, I sense that climate change and the level of environmental deterioration that's taking place and the speed with which it's occurring can evoke a lot of grief and a lot of fear. And that can stop us. But I think our power lies not in running from the fear and not in pretending that we're not in grief. If we can be with our pain, it turns. It doesn't stay static. It only doesn't change if we refuse to look at it. When we look at it, when we take it into our arms, when we hold it in our hearts with compassion, when we can just be with it and keep breathing, then it turns. It turns to reveal its other face. And the other face of our pain for the world is our love for the world, our absolutely inseparable connectedness with all of life. David, does that feel true to you? And is there anything you would add?
It does, John. Maybe on the far side of this, it's not exactly the way things were. It's a new equilibrium, a new balance, but it is a balance that involves us and the natural world. And the only thing that I would add is we have to find the ways of comforting ourselves. We happen to be living in a time of great peril. Others have done so. Empires have risen and fallen, and civilizations have collapsed. And now we're looking at the threat of sort of global collapse. It's incredibly frightening, but it's an invitation to act. It's an invitation to come together in ways we never did before. I find when it's getting overwhelming, I need to go out at night and look at the stars. I need to kind of take in the cosmic scale. And sometimes I need that perspective to help me catch my breath. And then when I do catch my breath, I want to use it to redouble my efforts to be as much of the solution as I possibly can be.
That is beautiful. Thank you for that. David, you have long been one of our foremost experts on food and health, and I've long admired your insights and the depth of your scholarship and research and your wisdom on nutrition and healthy living. As a physician, you have helped countless people to regain their health and to improve the quality of their lives. And now it seems to me that you've expanded your medical practice and taken on our precious and endangered planet and all the life it holds as your patients. Currently, we are endangering the future of life on Earth. But if we take your advice, we may yet discover that we can create something far better, a human presence on this planet that is not just sustainable, but also socially just and spiritually fulfilling and truly healthy. It's always a privilege for me to speak with you, David, and on behalf of Ocean and myself and everyone who lives on this planet, I thank you for your outstanding and heartfelt work, and of course, for being with us today.
John, you know full well those feelings are all mutual, and so are the thanks. I appreciate you and Ocean and all you do so very much, and it's a great privilege to join you in this conversation.
We've been talking with Dr. David Katz, founding director of the Yale Griffin Prevention Research Center, founder of the True Health Initiative, and author with Mark Bittman of How to Eat. David, in a time of planetary peril, when even the future viability of our species is uncertain, you are a voice of sanity, clarity, wisdom, and love. And we want to thank you so much for your brilliant leadership and for your partnership in the food revolution.
Well, thank you, my friend. And as I said, it's a privilege to be in your fine company and to be fighting this fight with colleagues such as you.
Thank you so much to Dr. David Katz and to my dad and colleague John Robbins for that fascinating conversation, putting it all into such a bigger perspective, where we are on this planet, our participation in the future and shaping the future of life on Earth. To express your opinions on what you've been hearing and to find out what other people are saying, post and engage in the comments on the broadcast page. Make sure to click the button to get the latest comments and engage with others. Our next presentation will be an interview with Jonathan Safran Foer. It will start at the top of the next hour, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, noon Eastern Time, 4 p.m. GMT, followed by Dr. Vandana Shiva at the top of the hour after that. Edith Shaw said, "Loving the topic of protecting our planet. Thank you for your commitment to bringing this summit to the general public. Another day of note-taking." Well, Edith, thank you for being here, and thank you for learning and taking notes, because that will help you to absorb, digest, learn, and apply what you're learning and share it with others. Wonderful things. Suzanne said, "Good morning and thank you, Dr. Katz and all. Information is so very important. I find myself wanting everyone I know to hear this. Is it too late for people to sign up for the summit?" No, Suzanne, it is not too late. Please spread the word. We still have several days left in this summit. We're just about halfway through right now. They can go to foodrevolutionsummit.org to sign up. And also, even better, once they're on our list and part of our community, there will be other opportunities to learn and grow and share, and they'll be part of all of that. Lynn Marie Fioravanti said, "And yesterday, our president used his power to force meat packing plants to stay open. He didn't use it to force U.S. companies to make PPE for frontline personnel, but he did it for meat. Unbelievable. This would have been a great opportunity to advocate for plant-based eating. So frustrating for me as a registered dietitian." Well, Lynn, thank you so much for raising this, and it is a kind of big deal, so I want to give a little context because this is important news for people to know about. A growing number of the facilities that process beef, chicken, and pork products have closed due to hundreds of workers getting COVID-19. Earlier this month, one pork processing plant in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, had more than 600 employees who tested positive for the virus that causes COVID-19 out of a workforce of 3,700. So at least 20 meatpacking workers have now died. Another 5,000 have been hospitalized or shown symptoms of COVID-19 since the pandemic began, and 22 meatpacking plants have had to close. This has caused pork production to drop by 25% and beef production by 10%. In the last few days, Tyson Foods and other major suppliers have announced that they could not keep up with demand and there would be shortages of pork and beef in the United States. So, as of last night, the president of the U.S. invoked the Defense Production Act to force meat processing plants operated by Tyson Foods and other major suppliers to stay open, even as the coronavirus spreads among their workers. The order declared that these closures were undermining critical infrastructure during the national emergency. So now, meatpacking plants are being forced to stay open. And the reality is that their workers are putting their lives on the line every day to keep this country fed with meat during this deadly outbreak. And they tend to be people of color or immigrants working for low wages. So if that doesn't sit right with you, if that doesn't feel right to you, then this is yet another reason to opt out of industrialized meat production, now perhaps more than ever. Alexa Pongras said, I have macular degeneration. Is there anything I can eat that will help me? Well, Alexa, the antioxidant vitamins in fruits and vegetables have been proven to contribute to eye health. So kale, spinach, broccoli, and squash are particularly known in this regard for having high levels of specific antioxidants that are beneficial for people who want to prevent or reverse macular degeneration. We also find that foods high in zinc can be helpful. For people who have intermediate or advanced disease, taking a high-dose formulation of antioxidant vitamins and minerals has been shown to help reduce the risk of vision loss. The American Academy of Ophthalmology says that people with the disease should take I'm going to give a little list of supplements here, specifically 500 milligrams per day of vitamin C, 400 IUs per day of vitamin E, 10 milligrams per day of lutein, 2 milligrams per day of zeaxanthin, 80 milligrams per day of zinc as zinc oxide, and 2 milligrams of copper as cupric oxide. So those are the official recommendations of the American Academy of Ophthalmology. It also turns out that cardiovascular disease and high blood pressure and obesity can be compounding factors. So the same principles we're learning about in this summit for lowering blood pressure and reducing excess weight can make a big difference for your eyesight as well. We heard from Lida Oliveira, who said, I'm 220 pounds. I've been overweight for the last 17 years. Yesterday, I wrote that I was overwhelmed and lost and didn't know where to start, but hearing the replay, something changed. I cried my eyes out since yesterday, and I need to change. I have ulcerative colitis for over 6 years now. I've been under medication that puts me at risk for cancer. I need to lose weight and to heal my body. I am so glad you introduced Susan Peirce Thompson to me in this summit. I've signed up for her 14-day challenge, and I got my best friend to do it with me too so we can support each other. I'm declaring right now this is the beginning of the end of my food addiction. It's the last time I'm trying a new weight loss program because after today I'm keeping this weight off. I'm more determined than I've ever been in my life. I don't have enough words to thank you for running this summit. It's become a milestone in my life. Well, Lida, thank you. We celebrate you and we want to support you, so we'll be gifting you with an empowerment package. Congratulations. You'll have the recordings and the transcripts and all the bonuses for life. Now it's time to move to the next segment of our broadcast, an interview with Jonathan Safran Foer on how to save the planet starting with breakfast. Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. This is Ocean Robbins, and I am joined by my dad and colleague, John Robbins, in welcoming our guest, Jonathan Safran Foer. Jonathan is one of the most influential figures in modern literature, with New York Times best-selling books that have been translated into 36 languages. He is author of Everything is Illuminated, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, and Eating Animals, and his most recent book is We Are the Weather, Saving the Planet Begins at Breakfast, which was voted one of the best books of the year by Financial Times, The Guardian, and Fast Company. Jonathan's work has inspired hundreds of thousands of people to rethink their food choices in light of the realities of modern meat production. So now, Jonathan, my dad and I are so grateful for your brilliant work, and we're so glad to have this time with you. And now for this interview, I'm going to hand it over to my dad and colleague, John Robbins.
Well, thank you, Ocean, for that introduction. And thank you, Jonathan, for being with us today.
Oh, it's really my pleasure, my honor.
It's a privilege to speak with you. Your book, We Are the Weather, moved me greatly. I read every word of it. It's about the impacts of animal agriculture on the environment and in particular on climate change. And yet in this book, you don't name or even allude to the essential message and topic of the book for the first 63 pages. You spend the first quarter of the book or so talking about other things, such as how Americans worked together and did what it took to win World War II, and how FDR and maybe even Elvis Presley, along with Jonas Salk and many others, enabled us to nearly eliminate the scourge of polio from the planet. Jonathan, why did you take this approach?
Well, I think that there were a few different reasons. One, let's say the dishonest reason. The dishonest reason was that I was trying to build a case slowly. We Are the Weather is not only a book about the effects of animal agriculture on the environment, but more broadly about why it's so hard, or why it can be so hard, to act on one's beliefs, to act on the things, or even, as I put it in the book, to believe the things that one knows, to take information in one's head and somehow move it down to one's heart and ultimately into one's hands to influence our daily choices. I am somebody who has often found it extremely difficult to live by my values, not only in the context of food, but generally. So that's part of the explanation. And then the other part of the explanation, maybe the more honest part, is that I was anxious about getting to the point. Because the point being the consumption of animal products is probably the worst thing that we do as individuals with regard to the environment. The point makes a lot of people feel defensive and makes a lot of people feel aggressive, and runs the risk, even in the context of a well-intentioned conversation, runs the risk of leaving people feeling demeaned or ashamed or humiliated. And because of that, a lot of people just turn off to it. So I wanted to win, or try to earn, a certain amount of goodwill that was necessary to get to the more difficult part of the conversation.
Well, I appreciate that, because it is a difficult conversation to have with ourselves and with each other. We can feel, as you mentioned, demeaned or defensive or aggressive, or we can feel shamed. We can blame ourselves for what's happening. At one point in the book, you quote a British journalist who wrote that if a cabal of evil psychologists had gathered in a secret undersea base to concoct a crisis that humanity would be hopelessly ill-equipped to address, they could not have done better than climate change. Jonathan, what is it about climate change that makes it so uniquely hard for us to effectively address?
Well, it's interesting because it's not hard to be moved by climate change. I think most people, when they see images of a superstorm heading toward a coast, or learn information about the melting of the ice sheets, or hear accounts of wildfires in California or Australia, or are exposed to the problem of climate refugees, most people are moved. The problem is continuing to care after we stop facing those images and stop being confronted by that information and stop hearing those testimonies. I found in my own experience that climate change is really easy to forget about. And it's especially easy to forget about when having to make decisions in day-to-day life that have serious environmental implications. So I might recognize the indisputable fact that air travel is terrible for the environment. And I might say, I'm going to fly less in the coming year. And yet, when it comes time, spring break, summer break, to plan the family vacation, I find it amazingly easy and tragically easy to forget about those things. Even if we are capable of explaining why global warming is causing the seas to rise, or causing wildfires in California and Australia, or causing the hottest days on record in places like Paris. I experienced that just last summer. It's hard to connect those things. If what was required to save the planet was to stop punching ourselves in the face, we would have done it a long time ago. Unfortunately, the things that we have to do less of are have fewer children. You and I both have children, so we know the pleasures of that. We have to fly less. I don't know about you, but I fly quite a lot. Food is a great pleasure for most people. And, we can debate the merits of eating animal products, but we can't debate the fact that most people take pleasure in eating them. It's easy to do the intellectual math. It's very hard to do the human math.
It is hard, and a lot of us are having difficulty wrapping our minds around it, or bringing our lives choices into alignment with what's needed. And one of the passages in your book that moved me a lot was your description of the incredible mobilization of people and resources that took place in the United States during World War II. As you describe it, during the war, industrial productivity rose 96%. Liberty ships that took 8 months to construct at the start of the war were completed in weeks. When people were asked to give things up, they did, and they did so without considering it some kind of noble sacrifice, generally. A case in point is in 1940, only 10% of American workers paid federal income tax. But by 1944, it was close to 100%. And by then, those in the highest brackets paid 94%, while the income that qualified for that rate was reduced by 25-fold. Meanwhile, gasoline was severely restricted, and a speed limit of 35 miles per hour was imposed nationally, and most people actually accepted that. I also know that so many people during the war planted home vegetable gardens called Victory Gardens, that very soon a third of the vegetables produced by the United States came from these home Victory Gardens. And by 1944, the amounts of fruits and vegetables harvested in these home and community Victory Gardens was equal to all the commercial production of fresh fruits and vegetables. Jonathan, when I reflect on how we as a nation mobilized then, I wonder, what might it take for us to mobilize now?
Yes, I would say a couple of things. One, it's easier to fight a war or to participate in a war against an enemy that isn't yourself. And climate change has us battling against ourselves. There's a convenience in being able to point at a foreign flag, to be able to point at, a leader with a little mustache, to be able to name an enemy that doesn't require a reckoning with the mirror. Secondly, a lot of the home front efforts that Americans participated in were willful, but a lot of them were legislated. So there was a speed limit. There were rations on certain products. And if we had a government now that was asking of us to make these changes, I think you would see a lot more changes being made. Right now, if you were to say, what if we had a tax on meat? Because we know the consumption of meat is among the most destructive things, if not the most destructive thing that we do as individuals with respect to climate change, you would meet a lot of resistance. If instead we were to say, we don't need to artificially inflate the price of meat, but let's stop artificially deflating the price of meat. Let's create a kind of free market solution for climate change where we stop subsidizing the meat industry and we stop allowing them to create environmental destruction, which we, or really our children and grandchildren, are going to have to pay for. if we simply made meat cost what it actually costs. And similarly, if we made air travel cost what it actually costs, it would be far, far easier for individuals to make ecologically sound decisions. There are different ways of telling the same story. There's a way of telling the story that is divisive. There's a way of telling the story that's demeaning. There's a way of telling the story that's scary. And there's another way of telling the exact same story that suddenly feels like common sense and that reveals our shared values, our broadly shared values, rather than the small differences in how we're going to reach the same conclusions. So, unfortunately, we don't have leaders who either have their hearts in the right place here or who have their heads screwed on properly, or who are going to be the effective storytellers that we need. And, we started to see storytellers in other places like Greta Thunberg, who has so radically changed the way that we talk about an individual's responsibility to work against climate change.
Yes, her voice is profound, and it is making a difference, stunningly, from a young person. Um, you mentioned that it's convenient to name an enemy, that we sometimes want to blame our leaders. And yes, the current administration isn't doing anything to help. The Republican Party in the United States is the only major political party in the world today that denies climate change. But I think it's misguided. It's not complete. It's really misdirecting to blame the Republicans. Obama failed to push climate legislation forward during his first 2 years in office when he had a Democratic Congress. Recently, Washington State rejected a carbon tax. Colorado refused to slow down oil and gas projects. And the French people protested a gasoline tax so violently that the tax was suspended.
I would also add, by the way, that 70% of Americans have said they wanted the United States to remain in the Paris Climate Accords, including a majority of Republicans.
Yes.
It's not the case that conservatives care about the environment any less than liberals do, and they certainly care about their children's futures. But we have told the story in such a way that it is divisive and that it's a zero-sum game and that there are winners and losers, which is a truly insane way to frame the survival of the planet, when either we're all going to win together or we're all going to lose together. I actually had a really sort of beautiful experience that happened about 2 months ago. I was giving a reading from We Are the Weather, and afterwards there was a book signing, and a young couple came up to me and opened the book to the title page, which is normally empty, and it was filled with their handwriting. And I said, "What is this?" And they said, "Well, we're getting married in a couple of months, and we decided that we need to have a plan. Because if we don't have a plan, then we're going to just continue to live as we've always lived. And this historical moment requires us to change." And their plan was to have no more than 2 children, to eat as vegetarians unless served meat at a friend's house and in a situation where they felt that there were no other options, to eat as vegans 2 days a week, and to only use car sharing services and to drive no more than 1,000 miles in the year. And then instead of just having me sign the book, they had a line that said witness that they wanted me to sign. And I was really moved by watching 2 people navigate this moment. And each of us will navigate it slightly differently or sometimes dramatically differently. What's easy for me may be hard for you, and what's easy for you may be hard for me. And we have to respect that, respect our differences, and trust the sort of good faith efforts of the other. And to approach this with a balance of humility, but also rigorousness. And the rigorousness is in having a plan that you allow others to witness, to say aloud what it is exactly that you're going to do, not simply, "I'm going to try to fly less, I'm going to try to eat a bit differently," but to codify it and get to give it, days of the week and numbers in the way that couple did, and to share it.
Well, that's beautiful. And they were asking you to witness that as a way of validating it and affirming it and strengthening it. And I appreciate that.
It's not enough. just to recognize that this is happening. And it's certainly not enough just to change our light bulbs and recycle and not use plastic straws. We have to get serious about what it is that the planet requires. And it's not ambiguous and it's not controversial. We know indisputably what activities have the highest impact. There are four that have a significantly greater impact than all others, which are have fewer children, fly less, drive less, and eat fewer animal products. The most comprehensive study of the relationship between animal agriculture and climate change, which was published at the end of 2018, the authors studied food production, food systems all over the planet, and concluded that citizens of Europe and the United States and the UK need to eat about 90% less meat and 60% less dairy in order to prevent what they call irreversible climate catastrophe. So we can talk about what each of us is capable of. We can talk about the best routes toward those conclusions, but we do have to accept the science as our starting point.
You write in your book that because climate change is a ticking time bomb, not all greenhouse gases matter equally, and that our methane and our nitrous oxide emissions, a very high percentage of which, an inordinately high percentage of which come from the meat and dairy industries, are in fact the most urgent to cut. Why do you say that?
Well, over the course of 2 decades, methane is about 86 times as powerful a greenhouse gas as is carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide is about 310 times as powerful. So what does that mean, powerful? Basically the way that greenhouse gases work is they create something like a blanket over the atmosphere that retains heat that would otherwise bounce off the Earth and back into space. And some of that is necessary in order to keep the planet at a sustainable temperature, in order to keep the world functioning as it does. But when we have a surplus of greenhouse gas emissions, then the planet starts to heat. We do need to reduce the warming in the next 10 to 20 years, because otherwise we're going to enter into what's called runaway climate change, when we will have tripped into these irreversible cycles whereby no matter what we do, we can't then go back. So, for example, the most commonly known one is the albedo effect, which is basically that white things reflect sunlight, dark things absorb sunlight. So as white ice melts into dark land or to dark water, the oceans are going to warm more quickly. And as the oceans warm, more ice melts, and it will become an irreversible cycle. So given that we need to prevent that, we want to look at our largest greenhouse gas expenditures. If you imagine that you're a family and you are worried about the mortgage payment at the end of the month and the possibility of losing your home, which in the case of climate change is our only home, there's nowhere else we're going to go. When considering cuts you might make, it would be foolish to first look at, buying fewer postage stamps. Wise would be to look at, do we really need an automobile? Or do you need to go out to dinner every night? The things that add up quickly, the big expenditures. So when it comes to our greenhouse gas budget, methane and nitrous oxide are far bigger expenditures than is carbon dioxide, which is why it's the thing that we need to cut most urgently.
It is, and there are increasingly voices, knowledgeable scientific experts, affirming this. Last March, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Stephen Chu outlined the impact of animal agriculture on climate change, and he said that if cattle and dairy cows were a country, they would have more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire 28 nations of the European Union combined. So I know that the benefits of eating less meat can be measured in our arteries and in lower rates of heart attacks and heart disease. But perhaps even more importantly today, it can also be measured in our aquifers and in our carbon emissions. And I find real hope in this because it shows that a part of the solution to climate change is in our hands with every meal we eat. Do you see it that way?
Well, it's not a question of seeing it that way. It is the truth. And I think this is an important point to make. We really need to distinguish between opinions or perspectives and truth. It is not anybody's opinion or perspective that our ways of eating are destroying the planet. It is scientific fact as best as contemporary science understands it. These are facts that the great majority, around 97% of climate scientists agree on. When I was on book tour for We Are the Weather, I very often would share a stage with a climate scientist to have a public conversation. And I'm pretty sure that every single one that I spoke to was either a vegetarian or a vegan. And it really surprised me because it's not what I was expecting. And I would often say to them, God, I had no idea. Why don't you talk about this more? And they said, well, I don't fly in private planes and I don't own an SUV and I don't eat meat. It just goes without saying for anybody who's familiar with the science. What's important is that information is brought to the public in a way, again, that feels inclusive rather than exclusive, something in a way that feels inspiring rather than scary or demeaning. If we say to somebody, hey, don't you know that burger you're about to eat is ruining the planet and destroying your kid's future? I don't think that that's the most successful strategy. I think even terms like vegetarian and vegan can sometimes do a real disservice because it doesn't leave room for most people. And whatever I might think and try to do in my own life and whatever you might think and try to do in your own life, the reality is the great majority of people are not going to become vegetarians tomorrow. They might over the next year. They might over the next 10 years. I actually believe that most people will over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, but they're not going to tomorrow. It's going to be a process of change. And I think that process is something that they should be celebrated for rather than made to feel shame about.
One of the things that I really love about your work is you have enormous empathy with people who have a hard time acting on what they believe and bringing their life into alignment with their values. And honestly, I think to a very significant degree, that refers to all of us. What I want to ask you is this. A lot of us are trying to learn self-compassion. We're trying to learn how to love our imperfect selves. And yet the world is on fire. So how can we best live with these seeming contradictions?
Well, sometimes one has to live with contradictions, In fact, almost always one has to live with contradictions. I think there's a balance we need to strike between a kind of forgiveness of self and forgiveness of the other and rigorousness. It is okay to say, this is as much as I can do, to honestly interrogate oneself, to investigate one's own limits, and to say, this is the most that I can do. But then you have to do it. So I can speak personally. Air travel has been a hard one for me. I fly a lot. I fly for work and I fly for pleasure. Until fairly recently, I just said very loosely and ambiguously and in a way that nobody could ever hold me accountable for, I said, I'm going to fly less, in 2020. Then as I told you that story about that couple who showed me their plan, I realized that I had to get more rigorous, more serious. And I decided that I could not stop flying for work, but I could stop flying for pleasure.
I think each of us have different limitations, different requirements in our lives, that certain obligations that we need to fulfill, certain, and then there's also things that aren't really obligations, but are more peripheral. I've been taking environmental responsibility seriously for a very long time. I use very little electricity from the grid. Our roof is covered with solar panels that we installed more than 20 years ago. My diet has been essentially vegan for 50 years. For the last 15 years, I've turned down 95% of the speaking invitations I've received because to accept them would have required air travel. I drive as little as I can. I drive less than 8,000 miles a year. My wife and I had only one child. And none of this, Jonathan, makes me feel better, which is okay with me. It's actually fine with me because I don't do these things to feel better about myself. I'm under no illusions of how much difference an individual can make in the face of the climate crisis. And I don't think that with a problem this big, consumer choices can be any kind of substitute for political action. But I do what I can because I think if enough of us did what we can, maybe we would cease to be tiny drops in an unbelievably large bucket. Maybe if there were enough of us, we could become the tide of history turning. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I do what I do. I'm hoping to inspire ever more of us to discover our power to do what's required, to do what we can, so we don't destroy the only home humanity has ever known. And so we might yet have a viable future for our children and grandchildren and everyone else's as well.
Well, I think that's both a beautiful and true way of putting it. And it points at a kind of false distinction between the individual act and systemic change. I would say two things that are important to note. One is, it's true that we cannot save the planet simply by living differently as individuals. It's also true that we can't save the planet without changing how we live as individuals and without changing the kinds of choices that we make. But also, and crucially, we don't just make choices as individuals. So, let's look at something like the Beyond Burger, which had one of the most successful IPOs in the last, I think, 15 or 20 years of the American stock market. When I started writing We Are the Weather, you couldn't find a veggie burger at any fast food restaurant in America, to my knowledge. And now that McDonald's is transitioning, in about a year, there will not be a fast food restaurant in America that doesn't sell a vegan option or vegetarian option. So why is that? It's not because the government regulated the industry and said that they have to offer these things. And it's not because the CEOs awoke one morning and said, hey, let's be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. It's because of individual choices. The market changed because of the demand of consumers. Now that the market has changed, there are these vegetarian options and more people are eating them. In fact, 80% of the people who buy Beyond Burgers are meat eaters, not vegetarians. So as we have these options, it's easier to make good ecological choices. So people are going to make more of them, which is going to nudge the market to change even more. And it becomes a kind of virtuous cycle. The same thing is happening with electric cars. Tesla's now the largest US automaker in history. It's not because the government created them or regulated them. And I don't actually think it's because of the beneficence of the people who run the company. I think it's because it's an amazing business. It has been made an amazing business because of consumer choices.
A few minutes ago, you alluded to the fires in California and in Australia. The ones in Australia just in recent months have burned more than 18 million acres of land. The number of animals killed in the fires is estimated to be over 1 billion. These fires have been a monumental catastrophe for Australia, and they're clearly a consequence of climate change. And no part of the planet can expect to be spared if we continue in the direction we're headed. This can be very difficult information to process. Some of us become deeply frightened when we contact this reality. And I want to say that I'm not so sure that's a bad thing. I mean, some people say it's not helpful to be frightened because we just shut down and we don't act. But I think sometimes it's important to feel afraid of things that could kill us. I mean, an example would be the threat of mutually assured destruction, perhaps motivated world leaders to end the Cold War. The fear of cancer has led many people to quit smoking. So my view is that we shouldn't let people's need to be hopeful and positive get in the way of telling the truth, although I know it can be very hard to face that truth. And I see your book as an example of helping people in a very generous and very kind and very thoughtful way to face the truth and see what we can actually do.
Well, there's a balance to be struck. Like, alarm is an appropriate response to an alarming situation. That having been said, we can overreact. We are capable of overreacting. And you actually see that sometimes with climate change. You see people race to these extremes of either we're doomed or we're going to be fine. I know that I can do that myself if I'm not really vigilant about my emotional responses. My kind of psychological resting places are either we're doomed or we're going to be fine. So those are sort of equally untrue or not in keeping with the science. And they have the effect of letting one off the hook. Because if you're doomed, well, then there's nothing you can do. And if you're fine, then there's nothing you need to do. What science tells us is that we are at the beginning of a process of loss. There are a lot of things we're going to lose. Some of them we have already lost. Some of them the loss is now baked in. But for virtually all of them, the amount that we lose will be determined by and only by the choices that we make. So, we're going to lose a certain number of coastal cities. We're going to lose a certain amount of the ice sheets. We're going to lose a certain amount of forest to wildfire. We're going to lose a certain number of years of life expectancy of humans on Earth. We're going to lose a certain number of millions of children to climate-related droughts, famines, and diseases. And the question we have to ask ourselves is how much loss is tolerable, because we get to decide how much loss we endure. If we say we're going to lose everything, and if we say we're going to lose nothing, which is what people who become alarmed tend to think, then we will sort of wash our hands of the cause and effect chain, and the loss will be, really too extreme to bear.
Some of the things we need to give up feel like necessities. The meat issue feels a little different to me in that people who eat diets high in animal protein, you point this out in your book, are 4 times as likely to die of cancer as those who eat diets that are low in animal protein. And to put that in perspective, smokers are 3 times as likely to die of cancer as non-smokers are. So it's remarkable to me that the changes, or some of the changes we need to make in our food choices to fight climate change, are in fact the same as we need to make to dramatically lower our risk for cancer and heart disease and diabetes and obesity and dementia and a host of other afflictions. And of course, these also are the same choices that are the kindest to animals. And yet I have to acknowledge that something in me, with all I know, resists the change. Now, I haven't eaten the flesh of a cow or a chicken or a pig or a turkey in 50 years. But I grew up eating meat at every meal. And even today, when I walk by a restaurant that's grilling meat and the barbecue aroma fills the air, I sometimes find myself salivating and my digestive processes engaging, even though it's been 50 years for me. So I can imagine that for someone else who hasn't had 50 years of distance, it can feel very different than it does to me. And one of the things I greatly appreciate about your book and your voice, Jonathan, is you don't preach, you don't condemn other people, and you even acknowledge your own challenges giving up animal products. And what I want to ask you, Jonathan, in view of all that is, are there ways we can help ourselves to make the changes that being an ethical and responsible person in today's world requires?
Well, I think a very helpful and important first step is just being honest. Simply acknowledging that something is difficult tends to make it easier. I think there's a kind of taboo almost about acknowledging that meat smells good or that it tastes good. It has felt more convenient or more pure or more righteous, if you're somebody who is plant-based, to deny that, or even to say that it's gross, when that may be the case for some people. It's not the case for me, and it doesn't sound like it's the case for you. There are plenty of things in life that are tempting that we just don't do. And I think it is easier to refrain if we approach the moment with all of our full human resources. If we're not straitjacketing ourselves with an identity. I can't tell you how often it's the case that I'll do a reading, and in the question and answer session, someone will say something like, I read your book and I've been a vegan for 3 weeks and I'm going strong. And usually what I'll say to them is, first of all, that's great. But secondly, just make sure you're setting yourself up for success and not failure, because that person is inevitably going to want to eat an animal product again. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it for all of their lives until the last 3 weeks. And let's just say they do, because that happens to most people. If you describe yourself as a vegan, then the second you eat an animal product, you have failed and you're no longer a vegan. But let's say instead you say, I've learned some information that really moved me intellectually and emotionally about the relationship between meat and the environment, or the treatment of animals, or rural communities, or farmers, or my own health, whatever it is. And I decided that I'm going to eat as little as possible. And in 3 weeks, I've eaten none. So in the first case, person gets, about 60 meals correct, then on the 61st meal, eats an animal product and says, I'm a failure. In the other case, the person gets it right 60 out of 61 times and says, oh my God, I've been getting this right almost all the time. Not right by somebody else's standards, but right by their own standards, right by their own intentions and aspirations. So, I really don't use the words vegetarian or vegan very much anymore. And I wouldn't even describe myself in those ways. I tend to say, that I want to eat as few animal products as possible because that makes me feel most like myself, because that's the person that I want to be. And if I'm not perfect, that's all right. That only, I'm not perfect in any other sphere of my life either, but it doesn't mean that I give up in the other spheres of my life. I try to be an honest person, but like you and like everybody listening to this, I tell at least one white lie every single day. When I tell that white lie, I don't give up on honesty. I don't say, well, now I'm just going to tell a lie at every available opportunity or whenever it's convenient. In that case, coming up a little bit short can actually feel inspiring, can inspire you to try a little harder rather than become a reason to throw your hands up in the air and say, well, I guess this isn't something I'm going to be able to do.
In terms of setting ourselves up for success, which is a phrase you used a moment ago, I think we can learn. I want to learn from the couple, the soon-to-be married couple you referred to, who brought their book and really had a plan of how a structured and defined and specific plan about how they were going to, as a couple, address in their lives, respond in their lives to the realities of our world. And in a way that would feel good to them, that was possible for them, that stretched them a bit, but not stretched them so hard that they'd rebound and snap back and give up. Well, I remember Paul Hawken, the founder of Project Drawdown, which is the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming, saying that climate change isn't happening to us, it's happening for us. And when he first said that, I had a difficulty with that because it seemed to me that it was happening to us. But I think what he meant is it's happening so we can awaken to our responsibilities, to save our home, and to become the kind of people who can make the needed changes. So, Jonathan, what kind of people do we need to become?
Well, ultimately, it will come down to, I think, caring about each other and doing what is necessary in our own lives to take care of the lives of others. And I think that it probably begins with a recognition of and a gratitude for what we have, which is really easy to forget. I have a friend whose mother, he was in the room with his mother when she got a really terrible cancer diagnosis. She went in to have, just a regular scan, and it was like out of a TV show. The doctor came in and said, I've got some terrible news. You have 3 weeks to live, something like that. And my friend's mother said, why me? Just as I might have said. But then she said, why have I been so lucky? Why have I had such a good life? Why have so many good things happened to me? Why have I had so many blessings? Which is not what I would have said. But I've thought about that story a lot. We have a choice now to look at what's in front of us and say, why us? Why do we have to fly less? Why do we have to drive less? Why do we have to have fewer children than we might be inclined to? Why do we not get to eat everything we want to eat, consume everything that we want to consume, and own everything that we want to own? Or we can look at this moment and say, why have we been so lucky to have been born in this existence at this moment with, unprecedented health and unprecedented affluence? And yes, we're going to have to say no to some foods or eat them a lot less, but we have more other foods to eat than any people have had at any time in history. And yes, we're going to have to fly somewhat less, but we're still going to get to fly more than any other people have at any point in history. We have to shift our orientation, I think, toward gratitude and responsibility.
And I hear you talking about caring for each other as a central component of what is being asked of us today, possibly more intensely, possibly with more serious consequence than ever before. You remind me of Václav Havel in some ways. Are you familiar with his work?
Yeah, I am. Yep.
Well, like you, he was a writer, and he came to be widely considered to be one of the most important public figures of the 20th century. And he said something about hope that I have always found to be stunningly inspiring and true. And I want to quote it for a moment, if I may. Hope, he wrote, is a dimension of the soul. It transcends the world that is immediately experienced and is anchored somewhere beyond its horizons. Hope in this deep sense is not the same as joy that things are going well, or the willingness to invest in enterprises that are obviously headed for success, but rather an ability to work for something because it's good, not just because it stands a chance to succeed. Hope, he said, is definitely not the same thing as optimism. It's not the conviction that something will turn out well, but it is the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. And it's hope above all which gives us the strength to live and to continually try new things. When listening to you, I'm reminded of Václav Havel's definition of hope, and that is something that we can access and we can embody and we can align ourselves with regardless of the circumstances, whether we have cancer and a terminal prognosis or not, whether we are gifted with resources that we can spend generously and abundantly or not. We can all find that hope inside ourselves, not the hope that blindly believes only good is going to come, but as he put it, the certainty that something, the way we live, makes sense regardless of how it turns out.
Well, I couldn't put it any better. I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. Well, today, a great many scientists are saying that climate change could be the greatest crisis that humanity's ever faced. And an essential theme of your book is that we cannot save the planet unless we significantly reduce our consumption of animal products. And I believe your message and your courage are wonderful and important, and I'm really grateful to you for bringing them to us. In these times, I think it's our task to sustain the gaze, to be attentive both to what's dying and what's being born, to what's broken and what's beautiful. And we're asked to remember that no feeling that we might have is final, and to affirm our power, nevertheless, to make a difference. We live in an age of peril, but what we do with that fact is up to us. We can let it shatter our resolve. We can let it destroy our sense of possibility, or we can use the pain to deepen our commitment to what is good and what is life-giving in ourselves and in each other and in the world. Jonathan, on behalf of Ocean and myself and everyone who plans to continue living on this planet, I thank you for your humility and your commitment, your deeply human presence, your caring, your commitment to truth, and of course, for being with us today.
Well, I thank you. And as I've told you before, Diet for a New America was the most important book for me when I was young and contemplating changing how the choices that I made with food. So if there's something that you found good in eating animals or We Are the Weather, you should know that you are also responsible for it.
Well, thank you for that.
Yes, indeed. We have been talking with Jonathan Safran Foer, author of We Are the Weather, Saving the Planet Begins at Breakfast, and one of the leading literary giants and thinkers of our times. Jonathan, your message is honest, thoughtful, heartful, and profoundly moving. It's been a true privilege to share this time with you, and we thank you so much for your leadership and your wisdom and your partnership in the food revolution.
Thank you so much.
So much to Jonathan Safran Foer and to my dad and colleague John Robbins for that very, very real, moving conversation, to express your opinions on what you've been hearing and to find out what others are saying. post and engage in the comments section on our broadcast page. Make sure you refresh those comments using the Get the Latest Comments button so you can see the most recent ones that have been submitted. Our next presentation will be an interview with best-selling author and world healing advocate Dr. Vandana Shiva. It will start at the top of the hour in about 14 minutes. Mirta Garcia said, Jonathan Safran for, I love your approach of not condemning and having apathy to those who are not on board with whole food eating, flying less, and making choices that will help our planet. I'm a newbie at eating a plant-based diet, and I will embrace your approach. Inclusion is more potent than exclusion. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mirta, for including yourself and including all of humanity in your heart and consciousness. We're all in this together. We really truly are. I see a lot of conversation about whether or not meat tastes good and whether or not people salivate with it. And everyone has their own experience, their own journey, their own process around this. So great to see people sharing. Angela Norman said this summit is not only impacting me, but my kids too. My 12-year-old son woke up this morning and requested carrot sticks first thing for breakfast. Wonderful, Angela. That is great to hear. And hooray for carrot sticks. Salim Rana said, this seminar has shaken me out of my complacency. I didn't realize how many nutritious foods I was completely unaware I should be eating. This summit is changing my life beyond anything I could have anticipated. Saving the planet begins by rethinking my food choices. Yes, Salim, thank you for stepping out of complacency and stepping into the next chapter of your life. We're so glad you're here. Lynn Sui said, I am grateful for all the honesty and lack of judgment here with all the presenters. Although I have no interest in eating something that tastes like a beef burger, alternative meat products have enabled my 12-year-old son to become a completely plant-based athlete. He enjoys occasionally eating one as an alternative to meat. The transition was seamless, and I noticed him choosing beans over those products anyway. Wonderful, Lynn. Thank you for sharing. Lisa Taylor said, this is my first summit. I'm so glad I invested in the empowerment package and the Whole Life Club. I have so much I need and want to learn. The constant theme of inclusion of all viewpoints is encouraging, as you never know what you might learn from others whose views are different than yours. Thank you, Ocean, for answering our questions and posing insightful considerations for us to ponder. I have a feeling I will be busy reading all the books written by the presenters, as well as the amazing resources provided. This will keep me busy until next year's summit. Thank you and your dad for devoting your lives to the improvement of others. You are appreciated. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for being here and stepping forward and participating. This is why we do this, so that we can share it, so people can use it, so we can help change lives together. And we're so glad you're part of it. In case anybody is wondering what Lisa was referring to when she mentioned Whole Life Club, Whole Life Club is Food Revolution Network's ongoing membership community. The goal of Whole Life Club is to help you sustain this work for life. It's about your whole life. Welcoming healthy, organic lifestyle empowerment is what the acronym stands for. And everybody who signs up to get an empowerment package also has the option, after doing so, to add to their order a 3-month free trial of Whole Life Club. So Lisa said yes to that. And Lisa, we're so glad to have you in the Whole Life Club community. And by the way, speaking of books, Lisa said she was going to be reading books from our speakers. Many of our speakers have books. They're fabulous. They're highly recommended. They're a great way to learn. If you've been particularly inspired or become particularly inspired by any of our speakers, check out their books. I also want to let everybody know about a book I wrote. It's called 31 Day Food Revolution. Heal Your Body, Feel Great, and Transform Your World. It came out last year, and it was really my goal was to put the distillation of all the years of work I've been doing into one book that would help people take action and apply the food revolution in their lives. So there are 4 parts. Part 1 focuses on detoxifying, getting rid of the bad stuff. Part 2 focuses on nourishing, saying yes to the good stuff. Part 3 is on gathering your community, building a healthy social connection and web of relationships around healthy food. And Part 4 is transform, and it's about how we can be a part of the transformation on planet Earth, like we're talking about today, and be food revolutionaries. The book is in 31 chapters, and each one guides you through more steps you can take. So that's a resource. I just want to share it. If anybody is interested, feel free to go ahead and pick up a copy. Laura Lynn Coggins asked, what does this have to do with breakfast? Well, Laura Lynn, I'm sorry if the title of Jonathan Safran Foer's presentation was confusing. The breakfast term was used metaphorically because, of course, saving the world begins at breakfast because that's the first meal we eat. And the bottom line is it has to do with what we eat and that we can make a powerful difference on this planet when we change our menus. Hopefully that got clear to you by the end, but in case it wasn't, I just wanted to clarify. Tracy said, may I ask a question? Chris Wark promotes fancy machines, big boy water filters, juicers, crock pots, etc. The only thing I heard you mention is a dedicated grinder for nuts and seeds. Do you feel these fancy gadgets really enhance our well-being choices and are worthy of investment? Well, Tracy, that is a personal choice that depends in part on your financial resources, on your lifestyle, on many other factors. So, of course, there are tools that can be helpful. And some people, clean water is pretty darn important, right? You shouldn't be stuck on bottled water for your drinking because that involves plastic and transportation. It's not very sustainable. And so you want to be able to have water out of your faucet that you can drink. And sometimes a filter is very helpful so you can enjoy the taste and know that it's safe. Juicers, depends if you want to juice. I actually don't juice personally much. I prefer smoothies, but I do like a Vitamix to be able to blend things up. I prefer to get all the fiber that's in there. With a juicer, you kind of lose that. But there are people who find juicers to be incredibly helpful. What about crock pots or slow cookers or pressure cookers or rice cookers? Well, a lot of these things can be useful. Again, it comes down to your resources and what you have to work with. But yeah, sure, some of those tools can be beneficial. One thing I encourage people to look at is cookware, and particularly to not use the non-stick like Teflon pans because those are actually highly toxic. Teflon pans, some of them actually come with warnings not to have birds in there. Every year, many birds die, pet birds, because they're in rooms, kitchens, or near kitchens where those pans are used. They emit toxins. And if you've ever heard of the canary in the coal mine, coal miners would take a canary down into the coal mine with them, and if the canary died, that's how they knew the air was dangerous, because the canaries were uniquely sensitive. Well, it doesn't take a coal miner to know that if something's bad for birds, it's probably bad for us too. So if you are looking for non-stick pans that are not so dangerous, some of the top options are going to be ceramic coated options. There's a company named Caraway that makes some ceramic coated non-stick pans that I think are pretty good. Extrema, Xtrema, makes some. Or there are other options. You can also go with cast iron or enamel coated cast iron, or even stainless steel, although that is not terribly non-stick. And we do use stainless steel for most of our cooking, by the way, in the bigger pots. But I'm talking, when I talk about pans, about things you might use for a stir fry or something. So there are a lot of tools out there. There are a lot of resources. But the bottom line is you do not need hardly any of them to enjoy fabulous, healthy, wholesome food. They can make it easier. They can make it more convenient. Sometimes they can enhance the flavor of things a bit, but you can do with very little and eat very well if that's what works best for you. So what do participants of Food Revolution Summit say about the impact, not just during a summit, but longer term? Many of our participants have adopted the concepts, the regimens, and the dietary patterns that our panelists advocate. One of them is Eran Zahavi, who shared a pre-recorded message with us about how the summit impacted his life. This is what Eran had to say.
My name is Eran Zahavi. I'm 34 years old and I'm an early partner in a startup technology company. I am very healthy and energetic. I love eating healthy food. My wife loves that about me and my diet and my choices, although that wasn't always the case. Up until a couple of years ago, I was pretty uninformed about the impact of my food choices and was eating a standard American diet. My wife was putting up with it, but it was a bit of a strain for us because I ate a lot worse than she did. And although I didn't know it at the time, it was actually a big strain for my body. So I discovered the Food Revolution Summit, and it couldn't have come at a more perfect time. I was about to become a dad. My company was growing pretty fast, and I would need more energy than I ever did. And lo and behold, I was able to find that through the change in my food choices. So with the Food Revolution Summit, I got a lot of the insights that I needed, and they came from trusted experts, which was great because I was able to get onto a healthier path. Now my wife and I are aligned with our food choices, and we're excited that we can raise our child in a healthy home, and we know what best to feed him as well as ourselves. And with my own personal choices, I found that my energy levels increased, my mental clarity increased, and that's been good for every aspect of my life, whether it's my business or my family or just my personal life. And the great benefit of the summit was that I could share what I learned with my friends and coworkers. And it wasn't just by me telling them what I had learned, but with the empowerment package, I could lend them CDs, I could email them transcripts, or whatever they were looking for. I had a resource to point them in the right direction. Amazingly, really, the Food Revolution has not only been good for me, but it's been great for my family, it's been great for my professional life, it's great for my health, and it's been really amazing for the people around me, my friends and my colleagues. And I'm just really grateful to have this information at hand. Not only did I learn it, but I can continue to go back to it, and I can continue to share it. And most importantly, beyond changing my own habits, I have the opportunity to share it with the people that I love.
Thank you so much, Eran, for sharing those words with us. Lorraine Casey said, I'm having a hard time keeping up with writing all this information that's being shared. Does anybody have any suggestions? I listened to each interview twice, once now and again later. What do you recommend? I'm a biology major, as well as soon to be vegan, and I find all of this super informative. Well, Lorraine, thank you for sharing and diving in so deeply to put all of this to use in your life. And other than listening to each interview twice, which is fabulous, another resource for you, of course, is the Empowerment Package, and we would like to gift it to you. You're obviously putting this to good use and diving in, and we want to make that easier for you. So you'll now own the MP3s and the transcripts of the entire summit for life. And by the way, the transcripts also come with source links to studies cited, so you can dig in and learn more about the specific references speakers are talking about. So congratulations. Our team will be in touch with you. Make sure you check your Facebook messages if you don't hear from us soon to see if they got in there somehow. And congratulations also to everybody else who is stepping forward and getting the Empowerment Package, including Robin from Los Baños, California, Nina from Boca Raton, Florida, Diane from Switzerland, Stephanie from Virginia, Victoria from Massachusetts, Karen from Delaware, Monique from Germany, and everybody else who is getting the Empowerment Package. We really are grateful for your investment in our work, and we hope that it's of great value to you. We had an anonymous post, someone who asked us not to share their name. They said, I work at Nestle. I've been exploring the potential of regenerative agriculture for the company in the future as part of a product concept. What has been a big barrier is the lack of common concepts like we have for organic. The consumer doesn't know the term regenerative agriculture. How would you see the best way to take this to the market and communicate to the consumer? Well, thank you so much for raising this. And at the end of the day, we need companies like yours making a serious commitment to positive social impact, and one that is driven by mission, not just by marketing. We also need a marketing team in companies like yours that's passionate and creative in articulating this so that at the end of the day, the case can be made to stockholders that the company can survive and even thrive while doing the right thing. It doesn't do anybody any good if every company that does the right thing goes out of business. We have to be able to build the marketplace and articulate it. So my invitation to you is to challenge the company to look at both sides. How can we truly focus on impact, on regeneration, on healing on this planet, and be a world leader on this? Because it's the right thing to do. And number two, how can our marketing team market this effectively and help change the world so that everybody realizes the cool thing to do is to be on the right side of history? Coming up next, we're going to have an interview now with Dr. Vandana Shiva on our food and our future. But first, a word about Food Revolution Network's mission. At Food Revolution Network, our mission is healthy, ethical, and sustainable food for everyone who eats. We want kids to learn about healthy food in school. We want doctors to learn how nutrition impacts health in medical school. We want the routine use of antibiotics banned from factory farms. We want a world where everyone, regardless of their ethnic or economic background, has knowledge of and access to healthy food for their family. We want a world in which heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, obesity, and diabetes are rare, and in which vibrant health is the status quo. We're spreading the word and standing for change. And with every empowerment package purchased, we make a donation to Trees for the Future, enabling them to plant an organic fruit or nut tree in a low-income community. Join this movement and support this mission. Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. This is Ocean Robbins, and I am joined by my dad and colleague, John Robbins, in welcoming our guest, Dr. Vandana Shiva. Vandana is a world-renowned physicist and an advocate for environmental sanity and for the well-being and liberation of farmers and the rural poor. She's director of the Research Foundation on Science, Technology, and Ecology, and author of many best-selling books, including Stolen Harvest and Soil Not Oil. Vandana is founder of Navdanya, or Nine Seeds, which is a movement promoting diversity and use of native seeds, and she's a recipient of the Right Livelihood Award, often called the Alternative Nobel Prize. Forbes named her one of the 7 most powerful women on the globe. Time selected her as an environmental hero, and Asia Week has called her one of the 5 most powerful communicators in Asia. So now, Vandana, we are so grateful for this time with you. And now for this interview, I'm going to hand it over to my dad and colleague, John Robbins.
Well, thank you, Ocean, for that lovely introduction. And thank you, Vandana, for being with us once again.
Good to talk to you again, John, and thank you, Ocean.
You know, last year, 2019, Swedish teenager Greta Thunberg gained a lot of attention for her speech at the UN Climate Action Summit and then became Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Late in the year, wildfires in Australia burned more than 25 million acres, destroyed 2,000 homes, killed more than 1 billion animals, and caused massive and probably irreparable damage to ecosystems throughout the entire country. Vandana, 2019 has been called the year we woke up to climate change. But if 2019 was the year when the world finally began to understand how dangerous climate change is, it certainly did not act like it. Global CO2 emissions were higher in 2019 than in any year ever before. Now, it seems to me that a big part of the problem is industrial agriculture, with its fossil fuel-based pesticides and herbicides, with its GMOs and monocrops, and its factory farms. Vandana, can you begin our interview by telling us about your campaign for poison-free food and farming and how it could help in the fight against climate chaos?
Poison-free food and farming is the only kind of farming we really should have, because poisons kill. That's what they're designed to do. And their origins are in the concentration camps of Hitler, IG Farben, the cartel that put these chemicals together. Its skill was extermination. Its skill was killing. And that skill is not what we should be using for a living world, for producing food that nourishes us. The 6th mass extinction that is driving species to extinction is so closely related to the climate catastrophe that is putting more emissions into the atmosphere than nature can recycle with her capacity of the biosphere. It is time to end the kind of agriculture that has become like war against the earth, war against our farmers. They're now talking about farming without farmers, and war against our bodies. So even if you were to make fake food, that war against our bodies will accelerate. There is no way we can escape the limits of nature. There is no way we can escape the cycles of ecology.
Well, industrial food production has definitely become totally dependent on chemicals, even though many of these chemicals, as you point out, are known to be poisoning the soil, poisoning entire food webs, causing cancer and birth defects, and are probably poisoning our bodies and minds in ways we have yet to fully grasp. But the justification for using these chemicals and these poisons is always about maximizing yield per acre. Now, Vandana, you've proposed a different way of thinking, which focuses instead on health per acre. And what I want to ask you is this. When agricultural output is measured in terms of health per acre, or say nutrition per acre, instead of just in yield per acre, what do we find? Do we find that organic farming systems actually have a much higher output in terms of health and nutrition than industrial monocultures?
Yield is a mismeasure, and it was a mismeasure basically designed to hide all the damages to the environment, damages to our health, and the production of less food as nourishment. I started to look at this when I was studying Punjab and the crisis that had been created by the so called Green Revolution. Yield only measures a single commodity. It does not measure the state in which the farm is left. It does not measure the health of the soil, the prosperity of the farmer, the richness of biodiversity, of insects, of birds, of plants. And it does not measure the nutritional quality of our food. It actually measures empty commodities that are toxic. 90% of which, as corn and soya, are going for biofuel and animal feed. So it is not a measure of a food system. On the other hand, when you shift to health per acre and nutrition per acre, as we have evolved through the biodiverse intensive farming of Navdanya, which means 9 seeds, we find that per acre you produce more nutrition, but per acre you give more nutrition to the soil. The soils are richer, and you're also recycling the carbon and the nitrogen, healing the broken cycles of the earth, which is then leading to the buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Our calculations show that if the acreage in India was to shift to biodiverse intensive farming rather than chemical and poison intensive farming, we could feed 2 times India's population with good nourishment.
Well, that would be a wonderful thing. I have been thinking that in order to move beyond fossil fuels and industrial meat production and industrial food production, we need to move beyond our addiction to a certain way of thinking, a certain way of thinking about ourselves and about human progress and about our relationship to the rest of life on Earth. Vandana, do you think we need to stop thinking of ourselves as the pinnacle of creation and instead reestablish partnerships with other species?
I think it's absolutely imperative that we give up the illusions of the industrial age. One, that man is at the top of a pyramid. Second, that we are separate from nature and masters and owners and can trample her living processes. No culture before the industrial system ever thought that way. We all thought of the earth as one family, of Mother Earth as a living system, of Pachamama, of Vasundhara, in all the different cultures of the world. We can only have a future as a human species if we stop that illusion of separation. That's why I've written my new book, Oneness versus the 1%. This separation is what has then allowed all the wealth of the planet, all the wealth created by society, to be in the hands of a few billionaires, while everyone else, including nature, falls into unlivable destitution and poverty. We have to become co-creators with the earth, but that means we must be totally aware and conscious of how the earth works. And my work over the last 5 decades has shown when we align ourselves with the laws of the earth and the laws of ecology, we actually take better care of human beings. At this point, the earth is not being taken care of, and most of the humans are being excluded. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the scales of hunger and poverty that we have, which are structural. They're not accidental. They're built into the industrial agriculture system and an economy of greed.
You know, I hear you saying that the Western industrialized world has brought the entire planet and its web of life to the edge of catastrophe. And we've done that by acting under the delusion that humans are separate from nature, better somehow, in control of it, masters of it in some way, as you said. We've somehow come to believe that the non human world was created for us alone and derives all of its value only from its usefulness to humanity. Vanda, there's a question about all this that weighs on me. It weighs really heavily on my heart, and I don't know if you have an answer to it, but I'd like to share it with you in any case. It seems that we human beings have somehow come to believe that we can destroy our habitat without also destroying ourselves. And my question is, and I don't know how to answer this, how have we gotten it so tragically wrong?
I think the crisis of extinction that we face as a species has been built over first putting other people to extinction. We mustn't forget that the colonization of the Americas was based on exterminating 90% of the indigenous populations. That's the first experiment in extermination. And if we had taken care of those cultures, we wouldn't be in the mess we are. If in Australia, people had learned from the Aboriginal people who had governed and cultivated that amazing continent for thousands and thousands of years, the oldest civilization there is, and they managed that continent as a garden. They managed the fires. Today, because of this idea of mastery, fires are engulfing Australia. So the extermination of people and then their knowledge systems and their value systems was the first step. And this didn't just happen, it was crafted because you needed to feel superior in order to colonize others. And as I've written in my book, Staying Alive, people like Bacon said, we've got to give birth to a masculine time where we do not see ourselves as part of nature, that we objectify nature and our masters and have objective knowledge. Or people like Boyle, who said the idea that we are part of nature is an impediment to human progress and prevents us from building an empire over lesser creatures of the earth. So anthropocentrism, colonialism were all built into this, and with it the rise of a mechanistic thought that allowed us to pretend that we could say nature is dead and merely raw material. And then animals were turned into raw material. I've debated with biotechnologists who said, oh, sheep are just furry little factories and mammalian bioreactors. This is how we have objectified the world, objectified women's bodies, objectified the human body. And this machine point of view, this raw material point of view, is what is degrading entire ecosystems, making entire species disappear, but worse, harming our own being, our health, and our future.
You know, when you talk about our way of treating animals, I'm thinking about a particular form of industrial agriculture that's particularly destructive and uniquely damaging to the planet's life support systems and to our climate, and that is industrial meat production. The Nobel Prize winning physicist and former energy secretary, Stephen Chu, puts animal agriculture at the top of his list of climate challenges. He said recently, if cattle and dairy cows were a country, they would have more greenhouse gas emissions than all of the 28 nations who are part of the European Union combined. Now, Vandana, one of the simple steps that I've long been advocating is that as much as possible, we eat beans instead of beef. If we were to make that shift, if we were as a species to eat beans instead of beef, what benefits would accrue to our health and to our world?
John, India as a civilization has always eaten beans. We call them dals. And we have so much diversity. And when the British colonized us, poor guys had no idea what to do with this. So when I started Navdanya and seed saving, and I'd go into villages and collect the different kinds of pulses and beans, and there'd be local names. Whenever I came to the English name, in every book, The chana was chickpea for chicken. The avre was cowpea for the cows. The tur was pigeon pea for the pigeons. Every bean had been turned into animal feed because the British could not imagine that eating beans was an option. They had no idea that these beans are not just healthy for us, but they're healthy for the soil. You don't need chemical fertilizers because the beans fix nitrogen non-violently. And when they are companions to our cereals, you can create permanent systems of agriculture, like the Navdanya system that we cultivate, or the Milpa system that the Mexicans cultivate. First of all, we forget that humans are animals. We've got to begin by taking care of this animal and remembering our animalness, the fact that we are living systems, we are not superior. In good farming systems, animals, trees, and crops have to go together. That's what creates in sustainable integrated systems. It's when animals are pulled off the land and put into prisons and factory farms. We get all the violence to the animals, but we get the violence to the earth. And we get the creation of hunger because then, instead of beans being eaten by people, the soya bean becomes a major animal feed. It's this intensive feed that is then leading to massive emissions of methane from animals and factory farms. That's why when you drive past a CAFO, the concentrated animal farm operation, you get a stink. When we work with cows, and my research foundation was started in what used to be my mother's cow shed, and she said to me when I wanted to leave a university job, come home and take the cow shed. Our cows never stank. They did not. They were herbivores. That's what herbivores are supposed to eat, grass. And I think the mess we've made in our relationship with other species, including animals, and then the mess we've made with our diet and the diet of animals in factory farms, that complex is what we've got to get out of. And definitely we've got to get out of eating what industry tells us to eat. We've got to start eating the way our great grandmothers ate. They knew how to eat right. And that's why I started a campaign, John, because our dear Amazon, Mr. Jeff Bezos, was in India and was, there's an agreement he tried to write with our Food Safety Authority so that Alexa would teach our children how to eat right. And I started a campaign, Amma, which is mother, grandmother, great grandmother, not Alexa. We need to learn how to eat right, but from our ancestors, not from the industry that will feed anything to anyone as long as there's profits in it.
Yes, Amazon, as you probably know, and as our listeners probably know, bought Whole Foods Markets not that long ago. And one of the changes that they've made, they're now considering actually selling soda pop, Coca-Cola, those kinds of things in Whole Foods Markets, which really shows no respect whatsoever for the basic underlying principles that that company was originally, to some degree, established upon, namely selling whole, healthy food to people and providing food that was produced in a way that's in harmony with the earth. But when Amazon took over the company, predictably, reliably, the steps they took to maximize profits are counter to those principles that would uphold our relationship to the earth and how we produce our food.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I find that very sad. Industrial food systems in general reduce food to a commodity. They use ingredients that they can be isolated and then reconstituted in a lab. But in truth, and this is something I hear you talking about all the time, Vandana, food is not a commodity, it's life. And every bite that we eat contains contributions from all the various beings that make up the food web. And every bite holds the potential for health and for disease, depending on how it was grown and processed. Vandana, it seems to me that food is actually a lot more significant than we typically acknowledge. In fact, I would say that food is the living currency of the web of life. Would you agree with me about that?
Absolutely. It is the living currency. If you want to talk about it scientifically, you call it the nutrient cycle, the movement of nourishment and nutrition through the food web. You want to talk about it in ethics, it is about food as a currency. giving life to all beings as it moves. And when the food is poisoned and degraded, instead of life, it gives death and disease. And it's not an accident that insects, including pollinators, which give us 1/3 the food we eat through their pollination, they are dying because the food is poisoned. The plants are poisoned. The pesticides are killing them. When the soil is sprayed, fungicides are put, our seeds are coated with neonicotinoids, and glyphosate is sprayed, and nitrogen fertilizers, also made from fossil fuels, are poured. The life in the soil starts to die, and the food web in the soil, which is what gives nourishment to the plants, which is then what gives nourishment to us, that whole system starts to decay. For the land, we get desertification, but we get desertification of our gut, something that scientists are now finding out that at the end of it, nourishment for humans is about a healthy gut with diversity of microbes, a forest within us. And when we eat monocultures, commodities, we eat poisoned food, we eat food deficient in micronutrients and trace elements, we are depriving that ecosystem within, which is maintaining our body and our minds. And all the diseases of today are related to this assault, both the war outside our bodies and the war within our bodies, whether it's cancers or endocrine disruption or diabetes or neurodegenerative orders. We are seeing an epidemic of diseases because of the poisons in our food and poison sprayed all over to grow a commodity which is not food.
Well, when you talk about the epidemic of diseases that we're seeing as a result of the way we are producing food and the kind of food we're eating, I agree with you. I see that happening. I see it all the time in so many places. I also see that there are many of us who are looking for a way to convert the ecological catastrophe and the human brutalization we're facing into an opportunity somehow to reclaim our humanity and our future. In your eloquent book, Soil, Not Oil, you make very clear that creating healthy soil and ending our dependence on fossil fuels are necessary steps toward a sustainable future. And I agree totally with you about that, Vandana. What I want to ask you is, what do we need to do? How does our thinking and our behavior need to change in order to make a democratic transition from oil to soil?
The first thing we need to change is, of course, stop thinking in fossilized ways. The fossil fuel age gave us this crazy idea of thinking mechanically about the world as if the earth is a dead earth, that the living universe is a dead universe. And that is what allowed the arrogance of man as being superior. We have to realize we are members of a living earth family, one species among millions. And we have to play our role in caring for the rest of the web of life. The second shift that we need to make is the age of oil made it look like labor was the only input. When I redefined the productivity to be measured in terms of total output and total inputs, I realized that it actually industrial agriculture, the way they manufacture the term yield and manufacture higher efficiency and productivity of industrial agriculture, is in the output, they only calculate a commodity. And if you put all the land under soybean, of course, you're going to have a lot of soybean. In India, if you put all the land under BT cotton, you're going to have a lot more cotton. But it doesn't mean it's growing more efficiently. In terms of input, instead of assessing the capital intensity, which is leading to the debt, which is foreclosing the family farms, or the chemical intensity, which is poisoning the earth and poisoning our bodies, or the fossil fuel intensity, which is giving us climate change. For 10 units of inputs, we produce 1 unit of food in the industrial system, when in an ecological system, we could produce 10 units of food out of 1 unit of input. The problem of the input calculation is industrial agriculture, a fossilized system, only calculates labor as an input. So it's in the definition of productivity that the fewer the farmers, the more efficient your agriculture, which is why Monsanto is now dreaming of farming without farmers. But not only has this threatened livelihoods in agriculture, which is the livelihood of most people on the earth even today, it has shut down our family farms, but it has led to the illusion that somehow working with the earth is a degraded form of work. So for me, when I say soil, not oil, first is to return to the soil as our home, as our mother. And secondly, the work with the soil, with our hands, in gardening, in creating biodiverse farms and gardens, that shift is also a shift of our humanity. And I have watched children garden and become other human beings. I have watched women recognizing that their work is not drudgery. They are at the center of the economy, and then they are powerful players in the transition that we must make. So we have to move from the idea of working with the earth as drudgery to working with the earth as celebration.
Well, that's a beautiful, beautiful way of describing the change that's needed. You spoke there about women being at the center of the economy. Whenever I hear people say that industrial agriculture, with its fossil fuel intensive, chemical intensive monocultures, is our only hope for feeding the growing population, I think about the 500 million small family farmers on the planet who grow more than 70% of the world's food. And I think of the women in rural areas who grow at least half of the world's food, the women who are the primary seed keepers and very often the custodians of food biodiversity. And I know that small scale farmers, most of them women, are literally fundamental to the world's food security. Vandana, is supporting the dignity and the well being of women and rural farmers, in fact, one of the most potent steps the global community can take if we want to reduce hunger and increase food security on this planet?
I think, John, it's a very, very important step. Years ago, I was asked by the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, to do a report on farming and women. And when I did the research, I realized most farmers are women. And definitely the case in India, definitely the case in Africa, definitely the case in Latin America. But even in the United States, more and more of the new farmers are women because they're realizing what's at stake. They're realizing how much harm industrial agriculture is doing to the planet and our health. They're also realizing how much possibility there is in ecological agriculture as a solution both to the planetary crisis and the crisis that people face. Not only are women most of the producers, because they have always worked to maximize nutrition, they don't work on very large areas of land, but on a tiny little garden. They will produce half of the food, while the commodity crops take acres and acres and acres. The man will cultivate potato, the women from whom I've collected seeds and with whom we share seeds, they work to conserve the millets, the pulses, the beans, the ancient vegetables. And the poor man is getting into debt for the potato. The women are feeding their families.
And what is happening now in the world? You know, in the US, we tend to have a limited focus. We tend to think of ourselves primarily and be quite self-absorbed. I'm asking globally, what is happening today to the poor, to people in rural areas, to people who are marginalized as a result of the climate change that we're already seeing?
So, John, I'll just give you data from my own country. 2013, we had such a terrible climate extreme, heavy rains and flooding in my region of the Himalaya where I come from, and 20,000 people were washed away.
Oh, my.
Before that, in Orissa, the cyclone of 99 had killed 30,000 people. In Kerala, last year and the year before, Kerala has never had floods before. Now they're having flooding that has killed thousands of people. So around my country, people are really facing life and death issues with climate havoc. And the same system that has given us these huge amounts of greenhouse gases has also created hunger. 1 billion people are permanently hungry, as the FAO says. And my country, where after independence we had got rid of famine, the Great Bengal Famine of 1942, which killed 2 million people, was the last famine. We had become self sufficient in food. And now, as industrial agriculture is being pushed on India, we are third last on the hunger index. So, India's economy, so called, is growing, but our children are getting stunted and wasted. And if you don't measure the well being of your future generations, you're not measuring the true economy. And whether it's climate disaster or hunger or disease, I mean, in rural areas in India, when I travel, I now find epidemics of kidney failure, cancer, diabetes. These are not issues of the future. When we were in the Earth Summit in Rio 1992, they used to talk about how climate change will kill people 100 years from now. Now everyone's saying, if we don't change today, 100 years from now, the human species will also be extinct, like the 200 other species that are being pushed to extinction by this absolutely insane system of producing food, running the economy, and imagining who we are as human beings.
Vandana, you're someone who sees deeply what's happening in our world and who holds life deeply in your heart. How do you live with the reality of death and with all that's being lost, even as you boldly and effectively work for what can still be? I mean, do you have any insights that might help us all to be with the grief that seems to be part of being a human being in these times?
I think, of course, we have to feel the pain. That's what compassion means, compassion, the ability to feel the pain of the other. And it is the condition of our being. It is what makes us truly human, but it also makes us better humans. It makes us totally aware of the fact that we are not separate from other beings, we are interbeings. All those gut microbes in us define who we are. The trees that give us oxygen define who we are. The earthworms in the soil that give us nourishment define who we are. The bees and the birds define who we are. We are not separate from the earth. And what is even while I see all the violence and the pain, for me, doing the right thing, being in service of the earth, and knowing that if you do the right thing with the earth, she will do a lot more than we little human beings ever can. And I'll just give you an example. So I started to save seeds because I did not want our diversity to go extinct. I did not want seeds in Monsanto's hands. And I did not want the illusion that seeds are invented by Monsanto. So in our Dehradun Biodiversity Farm, where we also have the Earth University, which is a learning center, learning from nature and learning from peasants and learning from society, we today have 6 times more pollinators than in the forest next door. So you do the right things, the reversal of the processes of extinction and degradation get taken care of, not mechanically because of your power over nature, but in humility by working with the earth and trusting her power to do amazing things.
For us to live with the earth and work with the earth and bring our lives into harmony with the earth, we have to have a different relationship in our thinking towards the earth. We have to stop being predators and more be pilgrims. We need to have more reverence and less desire to exploit. You use the word she when you were talking about nature, and we do that. We say Mother Nature, we say Mother Earth. You have spoken very fondly of your own mother, and you recently had a conversation with Ocean. He told me about it, in which you described that your mom, had announced her pending death without being ill and with a great deal of peace. And then, on the night that she died, she woke your father to say that she was going now. And then she curled up on his chest and died in his arms. Vandana, how has your experience of your own mother helped you to understand Mother Earth and Mother Nature and her needs for us to change?
I've learned a lot from my mother. So she did not want us to be singing nursery rhymes like Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water and then died. And all the nursery rhymes, because they were written during the plague, are all about death of children. Our mother used to write nursery rhymes based on trees and plants and nature. So we grew up both in the forest, where my father was a forest conservator, but with her teaching us at every step to be deeply conscious. She wrote a book 1 year before I was born on Gandhi's teachings. But even there, the book is full of nonviolence as the basis of our relationship with each other as well as with nature. And the third thing I learned from my mother was simplicity. That when you are full within, you need to carry very little baggage outside. And I remember she used to have 2 saris. And when she was getting very old, I was in Bangalore where they had the best silks. And she said, get me 5 silk saris. So I brought her 5 silk saris. She wore them and then put them aside and said, I wanted to see if I had felt dissatisfied by not having more. Actually, it doesn't make any difference whether you have 2 or 5 or 7. So simplicity was another very, very lovely teaching. And to never, ever bow down to brute power and unjust power and injustice. She was the most courageous woman I knew.
Well, what a blessing. What grace to have a woman like that for a mother. And maybe that's partly what has fueled you, given you the strength to do the amazing work that you've been doing for so long.
I think, Gandhi had a beautiful saying. He had talked about the 7 sins. One of the sins was wealth without work. Every billionaire today, the top 10 billionaires, all have wealth without work. They gamble on our money. They take rents from our discussions with friends. They exploit society. They patent life. They patent software. They sit back and do nothing. I think wealth without work is a sin. And wealth through work with the earth is the highest vocation.
Indeed. And I would love to see the world's ultra wealthy people recognize their debt to all of life and their responsibility to give back in a major way, in ways that don't just use their money to make more money, but to use their money for the greater good. And then we would all benefit. And I think that the wealth inequality in our world today, the level of it is so grotesque. It's a crime, really, against humanity.
It is.
We've entered what many scientists are calling Earth's 6th mass extinction. When you were talking about your mother, and I was remembering what Ocean had told me about what you told him about her death, I was wondering, have you come to a point in your life, in your journey, where you see that death is very much a part of life and not something to fear?
Well, it's not just at a particular point in my life. We have grown up in a culture where death is as much a celebration as life. It's part of the cycle of life. And you plant a tree, and there's a point at which the leaves will fall. And the falling of the leaves of the tree is as important as the growing of the tree. I think it's again the same Cartesian logic of separation that made us not just think that nature and life cycles, including our life cycle of death and birth, is a celebration, but to try and overcome it and constantly strive to see and have the illusion that you can live forever. It's unbelievable that, the rich are freezing their bodies thinking, oh, there might be a time in the future where there'll be a technology to make you come alive. And I think accepting death, not accepting violent death imposed by others through ecocide and genocide. No, that's wrong. We have to resist it. But death as part of living cycles Our body cells are dying and being born all the time, all the time, all the time. So birth and death are two sides of the same process.
I remember when I first started growing food for myself and my family, we would compost. We'd make compost out of all the parts of the plants that we couldn't eat. Nothing was wasted. And there was something about making compost and watching the parts of the plants that we couldn't use be turned into nutrients for the next succession of crops that was teaching me about death and life being inseparable and actually being partners in something that we are destined to and given life by. And it's actually, I began to think that if we are opposing death, if we are fearing death, if we think of death as the enemy, we are cutting ourselves off from a connection to the life cycles, a connection to parts of ourselves and each other in the world that we really need to be re-engaged with, because if we don't, well, we're going to go where we're headed.
Absolutely.
Vandana, you've been in the forefront of the effort to help us make peace with the earth for so long and in so many bold and exciting, to me, exciting ways. And I so appreciate your passion and your wisdom and your love. And I appreciate you making it abundantly clear that the idea that industrial agriculture is feeding the world is a dangerous myth, and it's led to large-scale destruction of biodiversity, of farmers' livelihoods, and of health on this planet. And what's more, it's a myth that's threatening the very basis of our freedom to know what we eat and to choose what we eat and have access to food that feeds our hearts and souls and bodies and minds. Vanda, I'm so very grateful to you for the clarity you bring to these issues, for the love you bring to all of us. And I've had the privilege of interviewing you and talking with you now quite a few times. And I must say that every single time is always a great pleasure for me. And on behalf of myself and Ocean and everyone involved in the food revolution, I want to thank you for your profoundly important work. And of course, for being with us today.
Thank you so much, John.
We've been talking with Dr. Vandana Shiva, founder of Navdanya, or Nine Seeds, and one of this world's leading voices for social justice and for sanity in our food systems. Vandana, your work is an inspiration and a source of wisdom to millions. We are so grateful for your brilliant, compassionate leadership and for your partnership in the food revolution.
Thank you, Ocean.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much to Dr. Vandana Shiva and to my dad and colleague John Robbins for that profound conversation. To express your opinions on what you've been hearing and to find out what other people are saying, post and engage in the comments section on the broadcast page. Make sure to refresh those comments using the Get the Latest Comments button so you can see the most recent ones that have been shared. Keep engaging, responding to others, liking ones you like. Let's keep this conversation going and growing as a community. Robin Swanson said, every time I listen to Vandana, I feel a deep sense of inner strength. She is an angel and warrior of the earth. I hope to have the blessing of meeting her someday. Yes, Robin, thank you. I feel that deep inner strength emerge in myself when I listen to her and interact with her as well. What an extraordinary human being. We are so blessed for her decades of leadership in this movement and her voice in this summit. Paul Flansburgh said, Dr. Vandana Shiva is one of the most authentic environmental and food justice advocates I've ever heard. As circumstances get increasingly dire, we need the voice of someone with uncompromised integrity. She advocates for the healing processes of nature rather than the technocratic fixes forced upon the variety of humanity by a largely monoracial oligarchy. We need to listen to her wisdom rather than telling all of humanity we know better. During the age of coronavirus pandemic, the diversity of those who practice mutual aid is inclusive, heartwarming, and an essential solidarity remedy for our planet. Thank you for elevating her voice, otherwise drowned out by those who refuse to help unless they can profit. Well, thank you, Paul, for joining us here. And ultimately, I think we need to reinvent our understanding of profit. There's nothing wrong with healthy profits. It's just they should come from a healthy planet. They should come from healthy food, not at the expense of health or the future of life on Earth. And ultimately, that's a pretty big change, systemic change that has to happen so we can build an economy that is based on life. So we make a living instead of making a killing. And in this time when so many people are losing their livelihoods, I do hope that somehow, some way, we can rebuild, not just to scramble through the rat race to get back to a paler version of where we were before, but rather in some way to rebuild in positive and constructive ways a healthier future. That's my hope. I don't know where things will go, but I can hope and I can work and I can stand and I can advocate, and I will do so because, my goodness, this is a beautiful planet and it is worth every drop of blood in our veins, every breath in our lungs to keep contributing in whatever ways we can to building a better future for ourselves and future generations. We heard from Janet Ward, who said in a recent discussion with a family member, I was challenged to address his belief that without fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides, we would not be able to feed the growing world population. I suggested that if we ate less animal protein, we would have more agricultural land to grow plant-based food. But I'm not sure if there's enough land to feed the planet. I'd welcome responses to this. Thank you, Janet, for raising this. So very important. So first, let me say that in the long run, regenerative and sustainable and organic agriculture is more productive because conventional industrialized agriculture based on fertilizers and pesticides actually depletes the soil over time, eroding our topsoil, and eventually we are left with deserts. The world has about 60 years worth of topsoil left. The way we're going right now, we're depleting it so fast. In the United States, by the year 2050, we'll have about half the arable, growable land per person that we had in 1950. And this is an alarming trend. What's happening is that we're losing our topsoil, we're using up our water like there's no tomorrow. And so if we're serious about feeding human populations, we have to take that into account. In the short run, fertilizers and pesticides, chemical fertilizers and pesticides do lead to higher yield, not in the long run. But in the short run, they do. Organic agriculture gets somewhere in the short run between 10, 15, maybe even 20% less yield per acre. But here's what we have to keep in mind. Animal agriculture is a disaster when it comes to land efficiency and caloric efficiency, because when you cycle calories or nutrients through livestock, whether you're talking about grass or grain or soy, through livestock, you waste most of those nutrients. It's like a protein factory in reverse. Right now on planet Earth, more than 85% of all agricultural land is being used in animal agriculture and livestock production. If just theoretically the entire world went vegan tomorrow, we'd save an area of land equivalent to the United States, European Union, Australia, China, and India combined. Instantly, that's how much land would be freed up by not cycling our calories and our agricultural productivity through livestock. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of forests that could be replanted. That's a lot of land that could be used for growing other crops that are nutritious for humans. So the notion that we have to eke every possible calorie out of every acre using chemicals and destroying the livelihoods and the food sustainability of future generations in the process is illusory. It's only necessary if we're going to keep cycling our calories through livestock. If we can move in a more plant-based direction, it's going to take that pressure off, and suddenly we can afford to think about the future. We can afford to think long-term and be sustainable and regenerative and sequester carbon out of the atmosphere into the soil. Kim Glazier said, I have an important question. I want to know how we help lower-income people get this information. And do we make fresh whole foods available to people who struggle on levels deeper than just wanting to be healthier? Is anyone bringing solutions to these communities? It makes me sad that a lot of children and people have to eat processed food because it's less expensive and it gets hard for them to drop the addiction. Kim, thank you for raising a critically important point. This is one of the things I am most passionate about. we cannot afford, that our society cannot afford, future generations cannot afford, our own conscience cannot afford for us to make health and health knowledge and healthy food only the domain of the wealthy and the privileged. If we want to create systemic change, if we want a healthy planet for future generations, we've got to get healthy food out there to everybody, not just a few people. So what can we do? Well, obviously, we can spread free information like a free summit. We can tell people, we can spread the word, we can reach out to communities and people we know. We can also look systemically. We can look at how we subsidize junk food. Right now in the United States, we have tens of billions of dollars a year in subsidies going to commodities crops. Essentially, we're bringing down the price of things like high fructose corn syrup, white bread, and factory farmed meat. If instead we were to subsidize healthy, wholesome food, we could shift the marketplace dramatically. There's a reason why Twinkies are cheaper per calorie than carrots or kale. It's because of subsidies. There are 14 subsidized ingredients in Twinkies. When I spoke with senior executives at Coca-Cola and asked them why they use GMO high fructose corn syrup in the United States but not in Europe, they're non-GMO in Europe, they told me, well, it's because high fructose corn syrup is subsidized in the United States. We couldn't afford not to take advantage of that. Well, that's courtesy of the U.S. taxpayer. And it's not just in the U.S. There are many countries around the world that are subsidizing the wrong stuff. So we could change that because essentially it's like you're being fined for wearing your seatbelt right now. If you want to do the right thing, you have to pay extra. So we could shift that. That's a policy thing. We could also enhance the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, which provides food support to people who would otherwise go hungry. And in the United States, there's an effort being made to double the value of the SNAP program for fruits and vegetables. It's called Wholesome Wave. It's a sort of private or nonprofit partnership with the USDA. And right now, 500,000 people in the U.S. get double value when they buy fruits and vegetables with their SNAP dollars. I'd like to see that mandated, that's what happens across the board, because the studies tell us that when people are a part of that program, they buy more vegetables, they eat more vegetables, and guess what? That's going to make them healthier. We can also look at things like school lunches and school education. Our school lunch program is egregiously underfunded. And so no wonder the schools have to depend on subsidies, commodities, crops, government surplus, and the cheapest of the cheap junk food. If we can provide the financial resources they need, then school food service programs can offer healthier food and education so that the students know why that's good for them. And quite frankly, for a lot of students, they're concerned more about the future of the planet than their own health, because most youngsters think they're going to live forever. And so when it comes to that, we can look at environmental education and sustainability education tied to food and bringing that into schools as well. Another powerful point of leverage is community gardens and school gardens, of course, backyard gardens in times of physical distancing. These are powerful ways to plant seeds, literally and figuratively, for the future. And when schools get gardens going, and then that can be a powerful way for students to have access to soil and to the cycles of life and to healthier food. And we can also look at how we can put an end to extreme poverty and provide opportunity for everybody to advance. Nobody wants to be poor. Nobody wants to be struggling to survive and just trying to make ends meet. And most folks will work their behinds off if they have a pathway towards a better life. Not everybody, but most people. And so I think we as a society need to look at the hard questions of how we can build a world where there's more opportunity and more access for more people. It's a public health imperative. So those are a few of my thoughts. If you have others, please post and share them in the broadcast page, in the comments. Love to hear what you think. How can we share this with more people? How can we uplift the health of the most marginalized and disadvantaged communities in the United States and worldwide? Because obesity and poverty go hand in hand. The truth is, statistically, the poorer you are, the browner your skin color, the more likely you are to eat a diet that is based around highly processed foods, animal products, and junk foods, and the more likely you are to suffer from and even die from diseases like type 2 diabetes, and to deal with obesity, to have cardiovascular disease, and all the other ailments we're talking about in this summit. And quite frankly, in the time of COVID-19, this is even more urgent than ever. we're hearing that African Americans are twice as likely to die of COVID-19 as their white counterparts, for example, because of underlying chronic conditions, or at least that's one of the major reasons. So we all have a stake in this, and let's share it, and let's spread it, and let's see if we can uplift the health of our population as well as ourselves. Orly Shamir said, I've been tuning into the summit now for several years, even when it wasn't accessible for me using a screen reader. I'm blind. I'm very happy to say your platform is now accessible, and being independent is very important. Thank you for many reasons. Your ongoing resources and information were pivotal in my healing journey in the last 8 years, from a serious opiate addiction which almost took my life twice in 12 years. I've embarked on healing my mind, body, and soul, and it's been a process that I learned how to embrace. Learning from Ocean John and all the incredible speakers gave me the clarity and encouragement to leave the corporate world and go back to school. I just graduated from plant-based culinary school. I was the first blind person to attend culinary school. Through food and through so many other strategies, I want to bring my 2020 vision to support others in healing mind, body, and soul. Every year I listen to all your interviews and gain so much. Now that your platform is accessible, I got the premium package to have, to share, and to continue to spread the message in order to be part of creating massive, lasting change in the world. Oh, thank you, Orly. We're so grateful that you are here and so happy that you are finding value in the summit. We've worked very hard to make it accessible. It's been a bit of a journey for us to figure out how to get the everything visual and all the transcriptions happening in real time as we're presenting this. I'm so glad that it's working for you, and so glad you're here. And congratulations on being the first physically blind person to complete plant-based culinary school. We're so happy for you. Does not sound like you are blind, though, in your consciousness. As you said, you want to bring your 2020 vision to support others in healing mind, body, and soul. Yes, yes, yes. Blessings to you. So let's see. Next, we heard from Kim Glazier, who said, I'd like to know if I can find information on a plant-based diet for athletes. For proper nutrition. Well, Kim, yes, absolutely. One great resource is an organization called No Meat Athlete. And in fact, with the Food Revolution Summit Empowerment Package, one of the many fabulous bonuses, is they're giving the No Meat Athlete Marathon Roadmap. It's a plant-based guide to your first marathon, half marathon, and 5K. So when you check out the empowerment package, make sure you take a look at the bonuses, and you'll see that in there. It's one of many fabulous resources that may be helpful on your journey. You can also go to their website. No Meat Athlete is the organization, and they provide just the kind of resources you're looking for. Now I want to introduce our recipe of the day, samosa lettuce cups. Samosa lettuce cups are the perfect healthy snack or appetizer for spring evenings, not to mention that mint is in season in the Northern Hemisphere. So you may be able to take advantage of this fabulous dish, and you can get mint at many farmers markets, or it's easy to plant in your own backyard. It tends to do very well. These samosa lettuce wraps are delicious and fabulous. Every day of the summit, we have another recipe of the day. I hope you enjoy this one. Sherry Rose Westover said, when I think of summit, I think of the high point of wherever you are trying to get. I've recently been diagnosed with non-alcoholic psoriasis of the liver. It scared me to death. I want to live to see my grandchildren grow up, so I started studying what I could do to make that happen. When I came across the invitation to your summit, I knew that was something I should tune into. I never dreamed how helpful it would be. I've learned so much. I know that thank you seems trite, but you have moved me closer to the summit I am determined to reach. Oh my goodness, Sherry, my heart goes out to you. Our hearts go out to you with your diagnosis. We're so glad you're here. We want to see you live to see your grandchildren grow up as well. And I hope you're able to gain value here that helps you to be in their lives joyously, happily for many, many years to come. And we want to gift you with an empowerment package to support you in the journey. So our team will follow up with you. You'll have the MP3s and the transcripts and all the bonuses for life, and I know you will put it to good use. Niana McElwain said, "This summit is speaking to my soul. I'm soaking in so much knowledge, and even though I've been plant-based for 3 years, I've recently become overly passionate about sharing the science and reminding our society of the interconnectedness of humanity and the natural world. I just can't take enough notes. This is my life purpose. Thank you all so much for your dedication and inspiration for the younger generations." Well, Niana, thank you so much for being here with us. We are so glad you are here. And for everybody who is participating right now, I thank you for your attention, for your curiosity, for your partnership, for your presence in this journey. I believe curiosity is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. And by bringing your curiosity and your attention here now, you are part of a powerful movement of people who are saying enough is enough to the status quo. We can do something better. We can create a healthier future for ourselves and for humanity and for all of life on this planet. So for your curiosity, for your participation, and for your action, I say thank you. We're now approaching the end of day 5 of the Food Revolution Summit. So to express your opinions on what you've been hearing and to find out what other people are saying, post and engage in the comments section on our broadcast page. Make sure you refresh those comments so you can see the most recent ones that have been submitted. And please join us for the daily wrap. We'll be posting that in about an hour right on the replays page. So you can come on back later and listen to the replays. Check out the daily wrap where my dad, Dr. Joel Kahn, and I discuss the day's presentations, what we learned, what we think you should remember, what stood out, what we want to reflect on. It's a fabulous opportunity for digestion, for reflection, for distillation, and for basking, honestly, in this magnificent conversations that we're sharing in together. You can also join in the conversation on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Food Revolution Network. Come on back and join us tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 Eastern, 3 p.m. GMT for Autoimmunity, How to Prevent and Reverse Inflammatory Conditions. We'll have some extremely powerful presentations from Dr. Sarai Stancic, MD, on the autoimmunity breakthrough, Dr. Brooke Goldner, MD, on how to say goodbye to autoimmune disease, and Anthony William on how you can cleanse to heal. In the meanwhile, post and share in the comments section on the broadcast page. Catch the replays at foodrevolution.org/replays. Check out the empowerment package so you can own it all for life and support our mission. And enjoy some delicious, healthy food, including perhaps the recipe of the day. We wish you a beautiful day, and this is Ocean Robbins signing off from day 5 in the Food Revolution Summit. No matter where you come from or what you've been through, the simple truth is you are meant to thrive. You deserve boundless energy, a clear mind, and a lean and healthy body. You deserve to feel confident and clear about what you eat and why. The Food Revolution Summit is packed with insights, and trying to catch and absorb all of them can be hard. That's why we created the Empowerment Package. With your Empowerment Package, you can own the entire summit, plus all the transcripts and loads of bonus materials for life. Absorb this life-changing material at a pace that's comfortable and easy for you. Join this movement. Support this mission. Buy your Empowerment Package today.